For the ones who get it done, the most important part is the one you need now. And the best partner is the one who can deliver. That's why millions of maintenance and repair pros trust Grainger, because we have professional-grade supplies for every industry, even hard-to-find products. And we have same-day pickup and next-day delivery on most orders. But most importantly, we have an unwavering commitment to help keep you up and running. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Hey, warmer from Evo! Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the Beeson family of podcasts. We've got an absolutely excellent podcast for you. Join me in segment number 2. We're going to have one of our good friends, Sean Paul, aboard. He does such good work over at the Field of 68. We're going to be chatting with him about some of these mid-majors that are coming to the forefront, what he's been making out of just the college basketball landscape in general. Couple that with the fact that we do have some interesting games that are going to be going down on Thursday, so we're going to be touching all the bases with Sean, a little bit of low major, a little mid-major, and a little bit of power conference basketball with him in segment number 2. In the final segment, going to get you guys picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Thursday as we hit some bank shots. If you do have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one of two ways to be able to fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at @Janet_D1. Keep in mind letters EM, they mean does not matter, size per usual. Please do send these into the timeline. Other way, that's via an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you are able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. And I did not get in any Twitter/X questions, but we did have a very fun day of college basketball on Wednesday, and we got a little bit of cleanup to do from the Tuesday card as well. Let's take a look back at it, try to find some trends, and try to get to know these teams a little bit better.
Games from yesterday is Greg buzzing about. Here is the rowdy recap.
A lot of times we see these Big Ten teams come up big when they're at home. That was not the case for Penn State, as Michigan State, they had won just one game straight up on the road all season long. They got number 2. They were able to take down Penn State by a count of 80-72, a much-needed win for Michigan State as they were able to go just 6 of 15 from three-point range, but you had Mr. Malik Hall really step up for the team. 29 points, 10 rebounds. He was absolutely remarkable. Meanwhile, for Penn State, they lose this game going 12 of 12 at the free throw line and 12 of 23 from three-point range. So they were certainly on it in terms of being able to make those shots. That said, they just weren't able to execute really defensively for Penn State. They lost the turnover battle by a count of 15-11, so that was a pretty massive win for Michigan State. I am doing this as a lot of these games for Wednesday are still going on, by the way, and that's why we're doing a little bit of recap from Tuesday as well, because of Greg Peterson Experience on Visa, the Sports Betting Network. That is from midnight to 3 Eastern Time. That would be 9 to midnight Pacific Time, so do need to do this a little bit in advance. So Maryland versus Iowa, that's currently hanging in the balance, with Iowa currently up by a count of 58-54, 9.5 minutes remaining in the second half, as both of those teams have really struggled against the spread. You've got Iowa and Maryland both entering into the night 9-15 against the spread. By the way, Michigan State with that win, they did go to 14-10-1 against the spread, so they've been relatively rock solid. Now, getting to some of these stuff that we did see on Tuesday, we saw Michigan get completely lambasted. They're down to 17-18 against the spread. That one went final, and they lost that game by like 30 points, but you also did see, in terms of the action that we got on Tuesday, New Mexico. They were about a 3-point underdog on the close. They were able to go to Nevada. They got the job done by a count of 83-82. It's a New Mexico team that's been one of your best cover teams in all of college basketball. They are now 17-7 against the spread. Nevada in their own right, 15-9 against the spread, but New Mexico really controlled this game at the outset. Things got a little bit hairy in the second half, but team went 9 of 19 from three-point range. Jamal Mashburn Jr. stepped up with 17 points, and for New Mexico, they won that rebound battle 36-31 with Nelly Jr. Joseph providing 13 rebounds, so that was massive for them. And then we saw Colorado State, when I had done this podcast, be up 44-30 at the half against San Diego State. They then scored 11, down them 11 points in the second half against San Diego State to have that slip slide away 71-55. So that was rather harebrained. And then you did see BYU win but not cover against UCF. When I was doing this podcast, BYU was up 39-26 at the half. Central Florida won the second half 62-51. It turned into a 90-88, just absolute marathon of a battle. So that was very fascinating, to say the least. Now, getting back to what we saw on Wednesday, DK Network right a pick, that was able to get through. I am doing this in the final 3 seconds as Loyola Chicago. They're up 62-59 against St. Joe's. They should be able to get that one in, so that gets us right back on track with regards to write-ups. And this is a game that is still going on as well between South Carolina and Auburn, but this one, it looks like it's not going to be going way way of South Carolina, a team that has been very rock solid against the spread all season long. But Auburn currently up 78-50 with about 7 minutes and change remaining in the second half. And it's an Auburn team that, as long as they don't completely blow it, they're going to go to 16-9 against the spread. While the South Carolina team, they're 18-7 against the spread. They've been able to do a relatively solid job this season. But for Auburn, 11 of 18 from three-point range. G&I Broom, he's 4 of 5 from three-point range, and so is Jalen Williams. So, South Carolina has just been hit by a falling knife, and DePaul's just been knifed all season long. Right now, UConn is up on them 52-29 at the half. I'll be thoroughly stunned if DePaul is able to give you any sort of an effort in the second half. It's just been sad and embarrassing for them all season long. But what has been very good for you all season long has been unders in Notre Dame games. They get the job done, but they don't quite cover against Georgia Tech. 58-55 the final. Most places had this as a closing line of 3.5. So you were able to get there with Georgia Tech, but Notre Dame now 17 unders to 8 overs thus far this season. For Notre Dame, they shot just 19% from three-point range, but they found just enough offense to be able to get this one through. As for Georgia Tech, they lose a turnover battle by a count of 10-6, and for Notre Dame, they did a good job on the glass, winning that by a count of 40-31. You had Marcus Burton be able to supply the team with 18 points. Notre Dame able to do just enough to be able to get that one in. Another one of your top under teams in all of college basketball, well, they just continue to hit unders, and that would be South Florida. South Florida was able to stick Tulsa into the muck, 69-50 the final in this one. South Florida, they scored 44 points in the first half, just 25 points in the second half, but they really didn't need a whole lot of points in the second half, as they did a really good job of just being able to D up against a Tulsa team that they've been playing some rather harebrained and some rather insane results of their own. But when it comes to the South Florida team, now all of a sudden, in terms of their under rate, is north of 65% this season. South Florida, 16 unders to just 7 overs this far this season. For a Tulsa team that's just been bleeding points, they went just 2 of 16 from three-point range, shooting about 35.5% from the floor. Meanwhile, South Florida, they scored 69 points on 13 of 24 three-point shooting, as Kashawn Pryor was able to supply 12 points, 11 boards. He did an amazing job being able to get the job done for his team. And Youngstown State, all of a sudden, has been on a little bit of an overkick. They were able to take down Robert Morris by a count of 87-77 for Youngstown State. They go just 8 of 28 from three-point range. So if you laid the 10.5, you were just a little bit off there. They missed by the hook, but for Robert Morris, they did have in this game only 7 turnovers compared to Youngstown State's 4. So very clean, very efficient game. You were able to get an over there, and ding dong, the witch is dead. We finally saw Detroit be able to get a cover and a win. Detroit 81-66. They completely take down IUPUI, and these are 2 of your worst cover teams in all of college basketball. Now, your absolute worst one is Pacific. They're 5-19 against the spread, but IUPUI, they're 6-18 against the spread, and Detroit, they're now 8-19 against the spread. And for Detroit, they go 7-21 from 3, but Jaden Stone did not play the first time they went up against IUPUI. He was instrumental in them being able to get their first win of the season. 25 points, 6 rebounds. So the monkey off the back of Detroit, they are now 1-26, which not much to celebrate, but you know what? You'll take any celebration that you could get at this point if you're a good old Detroit. And we did see out there in the Rising League some relatively interesting action on Wednesday as well. Bradley, a win but no cover against UIC. A UIC team has been pretty solid to the under thus far this season. Bradley wins that game 85-73. This was a overnight line of about 14-14.5, and for Bradley, they've been able to really do a nice job of being able to make a nice run here in the Rising League. They do fall though to 13-9-2 against the spread. Meanwhile, UIC, they've been a little bit all over the place, but they were able to do a good job of maintaining in this game thanks to the fact that they shot north of 50% from three-point range, going 10 of 19 from distance, with Isaiah Rivera being able to supply the team with 27 points. You saw Belmont be able to take down one of your better cover teams in all of college basketball in Southern Illinois, 82-68. Belmont gets it done, and the way that Belmont got it done was by just trusting in Jacoby Gillespie. 26 points on 11 of 15 shooting, and Belmont, who really makes their living off of threes, they go only 7-24 from 3, but Southern Illinois, they go 8-32 from 3, and this team has been completely built around having Xavier Johnson take over the game. He had 17 points, but he did so on 17 shots, so that was a bit of an issue for the team. And Evansville has actually been one of your top cover teams in all of college basketball as well. They're currently sitting at 17-8 against the spread. They were not in action on Wednesday, but rather on Tuesday, where they lost, but they were able to cover against Drake by a count of 78-75. So a little bit of cleanup from that one. They've been able to do an amazing job of being able to make you some money all season long. And then you've also been able to have some interesting results out there in the Big South as well. We're going to be seeing a Big South game that's going to be going down on Thursday as well. But that said, high point, they certainly have been a high point all season long, but they were not on Wednesday. They were a low point as they lost to USC Upstate by kind of 86-81. High point has went 15-8-2 against the spread thus far this season, but for USC Upstate, they went 9-17 from three-point range. High point just 9 of 27 from distance. So even though High Point was able to win the rebound battle 44-30, they do not come up aces in this one, as you did have Jocelyn Bodu give you 18 rebounds on the glass, but this has also been a High Point team that they just continue to cash overs for you, as well as this was another game that went over for High Point. 15 overs, 10 unders this far this season, as Gardner Webb has really been your best over team in the Big South as well. They have advanced now to 16 overs to 7 unders this far this season, 85-77. They take down Charleston Southern, and as a favorite of about 4.5 points, they were able to cover that line. And then the Blue Oaks of Presbyterian, they're now 14 overs to 10 unders. As UNC Asheville, they get the win, but Asheville does not get the cover as a 10-10.5 point favorite against Presbyterian, this by kind of 71-69. So we had some fun out there in the Big South as well. And then one other game that I do want to get you guys alerted on, Samford has been one of your more harebrained teams in all of college basketball, currently up on Western Carolina by kind of 52-38. So very much a game that's hanging in the balance with regards to a spread perspective along with a total perspective. But if you've been looking for money-making teams this season, this Samford team 14-9 against the spread entering into the night. So we shall see what they're going to be able to do on that front. And then we also did see Seton Hall absolutely take it to Xavier, 88-70, the final in this one for Seton Hall. They were able to go in this one 7 of 19 from three-point range and did a really nice job of protecting the ball, winning that turnover battle 13-9. They also won the rebound battle by kind of 34-27 as Kadari Richmond had himself a night, 20 points, 8 boards, 13 assists out of him. And then you did see UMass go on the road. They take down Richmond 69-59. These have been two teams that have been pretty solid against the spread for you as well. UMass now 15-9 against the spread. Richmond 17-6-1 against the spread as well. So that was one of very much intrigue as UMass was dealing with that injury towards the month of January to Matt Cross. He's back in the fold, and so is this UMass defense. They hold Richmond to shooting just 33% from the floor, and UMass completely bludgeoned them on the glass 46-29. And if you're taking a look trend-wise at what we're seeing across college basketball, it certainly has been an overwhelming year in college basketball, as you've had 51.3% of games go over the total, 2,114 overs to 2,005 unders. Meanwhile, home underdogs, they continue to struggle overall for the year, 555, 568, and 19 against the spread. But if you do take a look at the last 7 days in college basketball, it's been better for home underdogs, 56, 43, and 2 against the spread, while the over hitting at about 52.4%, 153 and 139 to the over. So that's what we're seeing in college basketball, and that's what we all got on Tuesday into Wednesday. And coming next, we're going to be talking about these Thursday games, a lot of the mid-majors, and just the landscape of college basketball in general with our good friend Sean Paul over at the Field of 68 along with Action Network. Next, right here on Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now a part of the Beats and Family Podcast. Lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast, and it is always great to be joined by this man, as Sean Paul. He does such terrific work taking a look at this great game of college basketball. I know that he's doing a tremendous job over at the Field of 68, doing their mid-major show. Coupled with that, he's doing a tremendous job over at Action Network, trying to be able to unearth us a little bit of coin when it comes to this great game of college basketball. You're able to follow him on Twitter/X at Sean Paul CBB. There's always a lot of spellings, but as Sean always likes to say, it's the proper one, SEAN on Sean. And Sean, it's always great to get you aboard. Thank you.
Yeah, glad to be here. Thanks for having me as always, Greg.
Thank you for joining me, Sean. And it has been just a wild ride in college basketball this season. And we're doing this just before we see a whole bunch of mid-majors take the floor on Thursday. And what have you been making out of the mid-major landscape in college basketball this season? Because it does feel like there's been a little bit of a clear, shall we say, divide between the haves and the have-nots. And I do feel like there have been the juggernauts that we were all hoping for to come to the forefront that have been able to do so in teams like an Indiana State, who's now ranked, along with a team like, even on a little bit of a lesser scale, UC Irvine out there in the Big West.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, I think we're seeing some of the teams, like we always see, there's always those 3 or 4 teams that are dominant, that are top 100 in KenPom. That's your App States of the world. That's your JMUs. That's your UC Irvines and your Indiana States, Drake, all in that mix. Those are probably the five of the best mid-major teams in college basketball. They've all been sensational this season, and obviously not all of them will get to the NCAA tournament, but those are the kind of teams you need to look for when you pick your bracket, because those are the types of teams that can make some serious runs in March.
Yep, absolutely, and I've been thoroughly impressed by those 2 teams out there in the Sun Belt that you mentioned a little bit before, Appalachian St, along with James Madison. And what have you just made out of James Madison recently? Because they captured everyone's attention when they were able to win that game against Michigan State, but as we recall, with James Madison early on during the season, this was a team that was very dominant on offense. They were getting to seemingly 95-plus points on the regular, but this is a James Madison team that has really changed their identity here in conference, and they went from being a dominant offensive team to being a team that really just guards the heck out of you.
Yeah, that's kind of what they did last year, and we saw that during the non-conference. They were great offensively in the non-conference, and they started getting it going defensively, and they ended up fading a little bit throughout the year. They're still really good this year. They only have 3 losses, and I think people kind of forget how good this team is. 2 of their losses came against App State, a team that I think is better than James Madison overall, and then Southern Miss was the other loss. That was just a tough road game. Andre Curbelo, I think that was one of his first games back. I think he was there for that one. Yeah, he played almost at a triple-double, I think. James Madison's a really good team, and they're great at defending the three-point shot. They push the tempo. They force turnovers. They're going to press a little bit. But the thing about it is, you know that they can also be really good offensively. We just haven't seen it as much of late, but they haven't had to be great offensively. Like we saw against Akron the other day, they won a 73-59 matchup. You don't need a lead offense when you're limiting an opponent to 59 points, especially an opponent like Akron who's really good. You have TJ Bickerstaff, who's a great player, especially on that defensive end. You have a lot of size. You have Terrence Edwards, who's still a really good player. You have Noah Friedel, who's a big-time shooter. I still think this is the second best team in the Sun Belt, but it wouldn't surprise me if they're still able to win the Sun Belt tournament. You have App State. You have Troy, who's right in that mix. They're tied with App State for number 1 in that conference. People don't really talk about Troy because they're another team that's more of a defensive-oriented team. But Scott Cross is a winner. It always seems like he's having really good teams at Troy. A lot of his guys came from different levels. Like you have Talon Connerway. He was a non-D1 guy at first. Christian Eugene, same deal. And then Amir Muhammad, same deal with him. All 3 of their top players came from either the JUCO or D2 level before they ended up at Troy.
A lot of people might not be talking about Troy. I am, because they've been able to cover 2/3 of their games this far this season. One of the best money-making teams in all of college basketball. Sean Paul, who does tremendous work over at Action Number, coupled with the Field of 68, is joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And as we know, on Thursdays, it's always what I like to call a day of a lot of steak. You're not going to get a lot of sizzle. You're not going to get a lot of top 25 teams, but we are going to see one of the more dominant teams in all of college basketball come to the forefront. That would be Purdue. And us on the betting side absolutely are very interested to see how this opener is coming out. We're doing this without numbers, but they're going to be playing us in Minnesota. It's covered all but 3 of their games this far this season. If you want to talk about a bulldozer in terms of making you money, Minnesota certainly has been that. But how do you take a look at a matchup like this and just overall Minnesota? Because it feels like every single time this Minnesota team is going to slip up, they continue to exceed expectations. But as we know, going up against Purdue, this is just a completely different animal for them.
Yeah, the one thing for Minnesota, and look, I've been insanely impressed by this team, and I thought if they were able to win at Iowa, get another Quadrant 1 win, I think that really would have put them in the bubble talk conversation, but something pretty bad happened in that game. Not only did they blow an 18-point second-half lead, that blown lead coincided with when Dawson Garcia went out. He left the game, only played 24 minutes. I don't know what his status is going to be for this game against Purdue. I haven't seen anything yet, but they absolutely need him because they crumbled offensively down the stretch against an Iowa defense that's pretty terrible. They just had no conviction. They didn't know what they were doing on offense, and obviously Dawson Garcia is the kind of guy that can create a shot for himself, get to the free throw line, make things easy. They didn't have that late in that game against Iowa, and they are going to need him in a game on the road against Purdue, one of the best teams in college basketball. But the one thing about this Minnesota team is they have a lot of size. They have Joshua Ola-Joseph. They have Farrell Payne, who's just an absolute big man down low. They have Parker Fox, Isaiah Enan. So even if they don't have Garcia, it's not like their size won't match up. They'll have plenty of size. No 7'4" guy like Zach Edey, but they have a lot of guys that can soak up fouls. And then you also have some guards that can go hit shots like an Elijah Hawkins, a Mike Mitchell. Cam Christie, who's been really impressive. I'm expecting a big jump from him next season. He's been awesome as a freshman, probably better than his brother was at Michigan State, Max Christie in his lone season there. The biggest key for me, though, overall from Minnesota is Braden Carrington. This was a guy that a season ago was shooting the ball pretty well from deep. 33% for a freshman isn't too bad, but he's 12 for 60 this year. Not quite Deshaun Harris-Smith bad, but he's really getting close to it. He's got to be better if he's playing that large amount of minutes. He's playing a lot of minutes. They need a lot more from him moving forward if this team's going to get in the NCAA tournament conversation. But Minnesota doesn't really stand much of a chance unless Garcia plays. I'm guessing it'll probably be like a 16 to 18 point opening spread. I would take Purdue if Garcia doesn't play.
Yep, if Garcia is out of the fold, that would certainly be a big hamper to Minnesota. But we have seen it time and time again from Minnesota. Somehow, some way, they have been able to cover all these games. They have been a complete bulldozer against the spread. But going up against Zach Edey down low, that is going to be relatively rough for them. As joining me on the show, we do have Sean Powell, who does great work over at the Field of 68. Joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And one of the more intriguing teams that we're going to be seeing on Thursday as well, I do want to give some love to Washington State, because the job that we have seen from Kyle Smith has been absolutely remarkable. And in a Pac-12 where everyone sans Arizona seems to be underachieving, this Washington State team seems like it might be the Pac-12's best hope at this point. Sans maybe Colorado of being able to get an at-large bid. They're going to be playing at home against Cal. They should be a favorite in this game. And if they lose this game at home at Pullman, that would certainly be a big hamperance for them. But what have you seen on this Washington State team thus far this season? Because I have been thoroughly impressed by them, and they're just tremendous defense in general.
A bit of a revenge spot because they lost in overtime against Cal a couple of weeks ago, but this is one they really need. I mean, Cal's a talented team. They have Jalen Tyson, Fardaws Amac, two of the better players in the conference, but this Washington State team, they're a great defensive team. They're going to play slow, and I was questioning how long this would be sustainable, but I think it's just legit because their guard play isn't really good. They really only have one guard on their team, and that's Miles Rice, who's been awesome. He's an all Pac-12 level guy this season, but their big men have been awesome. They have Isaac Jones, who was a stud at Idaho. He's been really good here at Washington State. Jalen Wells, who transferred from the D2 level. Oscar Clough, transfer from the JUCO level. Ruben Chinyelu, who I've been very impressed by throughout the season. I think he's going to be a big piece of Washington State in the future. He's just a big man, plays well, can block some shots. They have a lot of defense, and they have a lot of size. Not many teams in this conference can match up with that. And when you're a top 40 team in defensive efficiency, you defend the rim at one of the best clips in college basketball. They're just a really steady team, and they're hard to beat because they have that style. They have a built-in floor because of how they defend. I think Washington State, if they do what they're supposed to do, and they're going to be favored in every game down the stretch except for the Arizona game in Tucson, I think they'll be able to make the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I've been really liking what I'm seeing out of them. And in a Pac-12 where they needed someone to rise up because this has been a downtrodden conference all season long, they've been able to get that in. Just really the West Coast basketball landscape has been very interesting in general because, as we know, the Pac-12 is down. And I will say, the overall quality in the WCC, we're going to be seeing a lot of those teams on Thursday. I don't feel like it's too bad, but it's just been really diminished by Gonzaga really not being that juggernaut that we've seen in past years. They were able to get a really nice win over the weekend against a Kentucky team that is sliding away. But what do you make out of the WCC in general? Because one of the teams that is not playing on Thursday, San Francisco, been really impressed by them. But I mean, it's really been St. Mary's conference this season as they're going to be playing us at Pepperdine on Thursday.
Yeah, it looks like St. Mary's is going to be in the NCAA tournament regardless of what happens. This is a team that ranks very favorably in most metrics, and they're pulling a Gonzaga of old. They're blowing a lot of teams out in conference play. Looking at U Pacific, you stood no chance against St. Mary's in both games. You scored 28 points the first time. At least the second time you scored 43, but you still lost by 41. St. Mary's is a great team, obviously, and Randy Bennett, I know he gets credit, but I still don't think people quite understand what it means to have this level of consistency without attacking the transfer portal like other schools will. He's going to build from within. He's going to get guys that can play his system, play tough defense, and it always seems to work. They'll be back in the NCAA tournament once again. I think Gonzaga will join them in the NCAA tournament. Obviously, they're going to have to win some games. I would like to see them win at St. Mary's to feel better about it, but they need to beat LMU, Pacific, Portland, Santa Clara this time. They have to beat all those teams. Adding a win against San Francisco won't hurt either. But we saw them go into Rupp Arena. Even though Kentucky's looked really bad of late, that's still one of the toughest environments in college basketball, and they were able to drop 89 points. They did look like the Gonzaga of old a little bit there. Anton Watson was great. Graham Ike, it's probably his best game at Gonzaga. He looked dominant. And then you had guys like Ben Gregg and Braden Huff who were able to hit some big shots. And I like this team when they play a little bit bigger because you don't have the guards this year, and I think Mark Few has seen that. Dusty Stromer's minutes have slowly evaporated throughout the season. He was playing like 40 minutes a game. Now he played 11 against Kentucky. This team is better when you have Ben Gregg and Braden Huff playing the 3 or 4 because those are guys that can stretch the floor and shoot the ball, gives them a little more size. With Huff on the floor, they give up a little bit of defense, but this is a team that can really score the basketball still. They need Ryan Nembhard to set the tone, but overall, they have some really good pieces, and they only shot 4 of 18 from outside, and they still managed to win in Lexington.
Yeah, that was very impressive what we were able to see in Kentucky from Gonzaga. It was a Gonzaga team that really needed that game out of conference to be able to lift themselves up, and they were able to get that. And getting back to St. Mary's, as we know, this team really scuffled in the month of November. They just weren't able to get anything going whatsoever, but ever since those few rough performances to begin the season, they've been able to get on track. St. Mary's, in my opinion, has been one of the clear teams in which they started out very slowly and they've been able to ascend. And I do want to ask you, just along those lines, who are a few other teams that maybe a lot of people were out on towards the beginning part of the season? Maybe they got off to a rough start that now you're starting to warm up on, and you're noticing that perhaps the light has come on for them.
Florida started the season out 4-3, and obviously after adding all the pieces they added from the transfer portal, there's a lot of expectations there, and they are clearly an NCAA tournament team in my eyes. They have been really good of late. They won against Missouri, Mississippi State, Georgia, Kentucky. They led for most of that game at Texas A&M. They fell short there, and then they beat Auburn in a really convincing home win. This is a really good team. Their offense is really good, led by a pair of guard transfers in Walter Clayton Jr. and Zion Pullen from the mid-major level. Then you have another guy in Riley Kugel, who's the best pro prospect on the team. He's just been really inconsistent this season. But if they're getting that shooting from him, this team becomes a lot more dangerous. They're a great offensive rebounding team. Todd Golden's done a really good job with this team. They play his up-tempo style. Of course, a very good analytical mind Golden is. I'm expecting Florida to continue this hot streak and carry it into the NCAA tournament.
Yep, I have been very impressed by this Florida team as well. Do you still feel like they need a little bit more consistency from the outside? Walter Clayton has been a little bit hit or miss this season when it comes to his outside shooting, but certainly Zion Pullen, him being able to take the reins at the point guard spot, that has been absolutely massive for them, and we know that Florida is going to be able to do a tremendous job on the glass as well. And then when it comes to Thursday, we've hit on quite a few games that are going to be a little bit more notable, but is there a specific game, matchup, and or just team in general that you're going to be keeping your eye on that we have yet to hit on? Because like I always mention with regards to these Thursdays, we don't necessarily get a bunch of those top 25 teams, but a lot of diamonds in the rough, a lot of mid-majors do come to the forefront on these Thursdays.
Yeah, although I love mid-majors and I talk about them plenty, the game that's really catching my interest is Northwestern at Rutgers. That's a really interesting game for me because Northwestern, I think, is a really good team. They'll be in the NCAA tournament again, more than likely. But I think we need to start talking about Rutgers a little bit because this team coming into the season, they didn't have a ton of expectations. They lost to Princeton to begin the year, but we're talking about a team that is the second best ranked defense on an efficiency basis in college basketball. They have won 3 straight games, including an absolute drubbing against Wisconsin the other day in Piscataway. And the biggest difference for them of late is Jeremiah Williams is finally eligible, and he has been really good for them at a huge game against Wisconsin. And he just opens up this offense quite a bit because he's a guard that has the size, can score it, is a willing passer. This offense is 282nd in offensive efficiency. That is terrible. But Jeremiah Williams has done a lot to make this offense a lot better of late. They've had some close calls this season, at Ohio State being one of them. I think this team, let's just say they win against Northwestern. They maybe pull out a road win against Minnesota. I don't know. That puts them at 15-10. If things start trending the right way, it wouldn't surprise me if this team started creeping up on the bubble because there's something about this team with Jeremiah Williams in the fold that looks a lot different.
Yeah, man, this Rutgers team just needed a little bit of a spark on offense. They've been able to get him for Northwestern. Just been very surprising to watch them fall off on defense the way that they have as well. Boo Buie does a tremendous job of being able to run this offense, and Northwestern has been great from three-point range. But as we know with this Rutgers team as well, very different team when they're at home rather than on the road. It's almost like handicapping 2 different teams, but a man that is very consistent. Home, road, neutral court, you name it, this man is going to give you 110%, and he's always going to give you a great effort. That'd be you, Sean. You do great work over at Action Network, coupled with the Field of 68. So love the good people at home. Know what's all on tap for you and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
Hey, you could drop a follow at Sean Paul CBB, and you'll find any content I do over there.
Always great to be able to get Sean aboard. He does such a good job taking a look at this great game that we all know and love. So big thanks to him for joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VC Family Podcast. And coming up next, it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Thursday as we hit some big shots. we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. It is always a pleasure to get our good friend Sean Paul aboard. He does great work over at the Field of 68, coupled with that Action Network, taking a look at this tremendous game of basketball that we all know and love. Every single time he joins this show, he lends absolutely tremendous insights, and it was great to be able to get him on today to talk a little bit about these mid-majors and so much more. So big thanks to Sean for joining me in the last segment. Now it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Thursday as we hit some bank shots.
Most financial establishments close at a certain time, but not here. It is time for a side and total on every game on today's betting board bank shots.
Do note that as per usual, any changes that are made to these plays will be listed up on my Twitter/X feed at GNN_D1, and we're going to be going in Las Vegas rotation order. This is where we go with the games with 3 digits on the rotation first, and then the games that have 6 digits on there, those are going to be at the bottom. That'll keep things all nice, neat, clean, and easy. So without further ado, let's dive in. 7-17, 7-18 on the betting board. It is Rutgers, and they play us in Northwestern. Northwestern, a 2 to 2.5 point underdog. Your total on this game between 131 and 131.5. I know that Sean was highlighting this game a little bit before, and I am going to be willing to go with Rutgers. I did set them as a 3-point favorite. Rutgers is just a completely different team when they're at the rack rather than in a roadside-shoot court environment. They do have one of the better home court advantages that you're going to find in all of college basketball, and that really bears itself out in the defensive numbers, as Rutgers overall is a great defense. 4th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but they're giving up 18.6 points fewer per 100 possessions when they're at home rather than in a roadside-shoot court environment, and they're going up against a Northwestern team that just has not been terrific in terms of their defense. Northwestern, 180th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Now, for Rutgers, this is a bottom 50 team in all of college basketball in terms of 3-point shooting percentage, so they're not going to be able to exploit as much the weakness that you have with Northwestern allowing teams to shoot well over 35% from 3-point range as far this season. As a matter of fact, it is 293rd in terms of overall opponent's 3-point shooting percentage, so that's a little bit rough, but where Rutgers is going to be able to win the battle is down low. Northwestern also well outside the top 200 with regards to rebound rate, as Brooks Barnizer is the only guy on the roster that does give you north of 4.5 rebounds per game. He's been solid for Northwestern. He's been able to haul in there about 7 to 8 rebounds per game, but Cliff Barui giving nearly 3 blocks, being able to do a nice job hitting the glass, being able to supply 9 boards, about 10 points per game. That has been big. You've also been able to have Andre Hyatt be able to step up a little bit more in terms of this offense. He's been able to supply the team with 11.3 points per game, and then getting back Jeremiah Williams. He was out for about a year and a half. Last played during the 2021-22 season over at Temple. He's been able to give this team a nice little spark on offense. 14 points per game in the 3 games that he's played, and I don't know how much it elevates Rutgers, but it certainly doesn't hurt. A team that has been well outside the top 250 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, while Northwestern has been one of your best 3-point shooting teams in all of college basketball. Boo Buie, right around about 5.5 assists, 19 points per game, shoots 40% from 3, and as a whole, it's a Northwestern team that out of their top 5 scorers, 4 of them do shoot at least 40% from 3-point range, with Ty Berry being able to supply the team with about 11.5 points per contest, but it is also a little bit of a top-heavy team. Rutgers can sometimes have some difficulties with regards to being able to guard the arc, but at home, those really go away. Rutgers at home allows opponents to shoot just 29% from 3-point range. I do think that you get more points up on the board than we're accustomed to seeing in terms of this Rutgers team, but I still think that it's going to be a slow slog, as Northwestern is well outside the top 250 in terms of total possessions per game as well. So I do think that this is one of those classic grind-em-out games at the rack. Did set my total at a 129, as I don't think Northwestern could get it going from the outside. So looking at the under on north of 130, and with Rutgers, made them a 3-point favorite, going to be one to lay the 2.5 with them. 7-19, 7-20 on the betting board. Appalachian St plays us to Marshall. Marshall is an underdog of 10.5 points. Your total on this game is 149. I said Appalachian State as an 11.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay this number. Appalachian State played that harebrained double overtime game against Toledo, which did warp their defensive numbers just a little bit, but I mean, this team is still, check it in, 28th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and Marshall last season was able to ascend in this conference because they did step it up on defense. They're back to being the Marshall defense that we all know and love, about 176th in the country. Only this season they have not been able to do as good of a job of being able to generate turnovers. Last season, Marshall was very good at being able to generate those turnovers, and this season, they're only getting about 6.5 steals per contest. That's right on par with an Appalachian State team that plays significantly slower than they do. When it comes to this Marshall team, you've been able to have some guys like Obiana, Onchile, Gillian be able to step up with about 16.5 points, 6 boards, shoots 38.5% from 3, but the 31.2% three-point shooting percentage overall, that's the bottom 100 mark in all of college basketball. And for Marshall, they've had some difficulties as well being able to guard the arc, though. A lot of those have actually come at home. They allow opponents to shoot 32.5% from three-point range away from home, more like 34.5% from 3 at home, so that's been very intriguing to take a look at, to say the least. But Appalachian State is a top 75 team in terms of their rebound rate, and they do an even better job in terms of their actual low post, just shot blocking, denying you 2-point shots defense, as you've got Trevon Spillers who's able to give you 8 boards, 13.5 points per game, chips in there, a block and a half per contest, and then Justin Abson. He is a top 10 player in terms of blocks per game in all of college basketball, supplies you with about 6 to 7 rebounds per game, but his real significance is the north of 3 blocks per game. Now, when it comes to Appalachian State, they do shoot sub 68% the free throw line, sub 32% from 3-point range, but being 10th in the country in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, going up against a Marshall team that they really don't have a ton down low, and Appalachian State being the better team at being able to take care of the ball. They only turn the ball over about 11 times per contest. I do think that Appalachian State going to be able to get it done. This Appalachian State team, they do a nice job being able to play their slower tempo. They're outside the top 225 in terms of total possessions per game. Meanwhile, you got a Marshall team that's looking to run it and gun it. Marshall is well inside the top 75 in terms of total possessions per game. So this is a circumstance where I am going to be willing to lay the number with Appalachian State. I did set them as a favorite of 11.5 points, and with regards to the total, I did set mine at a 147.5. So going to be willing to lay with App State, and here at a 149, diving under. 721, 722 on the betting board. Hampton, it's the road face-off against Stony Brook, and Stony Brook is a favorite of 12 points. Your total on this game, it is 144 to 144.5. I did set my total 144, so here at the 144.5, that is my buy point on the under. Now for Hampton, they've been able to get a little bit of a sign of life, as all of a sudden Jordan Nesbitt, who was banged up to begin the season, and when he came back his first few games, just in general was not effective. He's been able to give this team a nice spark. He's overall for the season averaging about 10 points, 4.5 rebounds per game, but you look at what he's been able to do recently, and he has been much more consistent. Last 2 games have been a little bit more hot and cold, but he has been able to get to at least 9 points in now 6 out of the team's last 7 games. He's supplying the team with a lot of facilitation as well. He has had at least 3 assists in every single game ever since January 4th, so he's been able to be a helper on that side of things, and that's big because the Hampton team, they've turned the ball over north of 13 times per contest. Hampton is looking to play a up-tempo brand of basketball, as they are in the top 50 in terms of total possessions per game, and it is translated into some very sloppy defense, to say the least. Hampton, they're currently checking in 349th in all of college basketball in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, so I will say, very strangely, they're actually giving up 5.6 points fewer per 100 possessions in a road/neutral court environment rather than at home, but that also compounds when you're 302nd in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, going up against a Stony Brook team that they do a nice job of being able to take care of the ball. Less than 11 turnovers per contest. Stony Brook just 212th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, but they've got some nice featured guys. Tyler Stevenson Moore is able to shoot about 38.5% from 3-point range. He supplies the team with 15 points per contest, and as a matter of fact, each of your top 5 guys that have made at least 1 3 this year are shooting at least 35.4% from distance. The real issue for this team is down low. They're well outside the top 225 with regards to their rebound rate. Charles Mado, Andre Sadi have been able to combine for 13 rebounds per game. Nobody else really gives you boards. Even Keenan Fitzmaurice, who stands 7 feet tall, he shoots 37% from 3, supplies 7.5 points per game, but he only gives you about 4.2 rebounds per game. For Hampton, you do have Kyrese Mullen, who's been able to give you 15 points. He's able to supply about 9 rebounds per game, but outside of Mullen, you really don't have a lot down low either, and that should allow the Stony Brook team to be able to get by, even though the low post play, it can be a little bit more suspect. Hampton just 300th in the country with regards to rebound rate, so that does put me on Stony Brook in this spot. I made them a 14-point favorite, and with regards to the total, even though you do have a Hampton team that runs it and guns it, and Stony Brook, they are outside the top 200 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and for Stony Brook, this has been a pretty ghastly 3-point shooting defense. They are well outside the top 275 in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. As a matter of fact, 308th in the country, but that does lower to 32.3% at home. I do think that Hampton going to struggle to be able to hit those outside shots, so did set Stony Brook as a favorite 14 points, looking to lay the number, and 144.5 is my buy point on the under. 723, 724 on the betting board. Monmouth plays us to Campbell. Campbell is an underdog of 7 points. Your total on this game, it is 140.5. I did set Monmouth as a favorite of 8 points, so I'm going to be willing to lay the 7. When it comes to this Campbell squad, they have been really looking to slow things down outside the top 250 in terms of total possessions per game, and when it comes to Campbell, it's been such an intriguing team this year in that they have been a team that struggled a little bit on the road. At home, they allow opponents to shoot just 31.8% from three-point range. This does balloon up to about 35.5% from three-point range away from home. And just because you play slowly doesn't mean that you play great defense. And Campbell is an example of this. 241st in all of college basketball in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They go up against a Monmouth team that is certainly not a world beater in terms of defense or anything like that. But for Monmouth, they are right in that category, about 224th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. And what has been so big for this team is Xander Rice, north of 20 points per contest, doles out 3 assists, shoots the high 30s from three-point range. And then you got Jack Collins, who's able to give you about 6.5 rebounds per game. He's been able to throw in their double figures for this team. Nika Kutsinatovsky, hopefully I said that correctly, he's been able to supply you with about 6.5, 7 rebounds. At 6'7", he's got some nice versatility as well. And for Campbell, they just completely rely upon Anthony De La Rosa for everything, and he's been good. 18.5 points, 6 boards. He's able to throw in there about 2.5 assists per game. And now you've got Lorinas Vesterius, who's been able to chip in there about 3.2 assists, 11 points, shoots 43% from 3. It's a 6'6" combo player, so he finally has a little bit of a Robin to be able to help him out. But for Campbell, it's been all over the place in hairbrain as the offense has all of a sudden been able to get going for this team. They've been able to break the 67-point plateau in each of their last 6 games, and for that matter, in all but 1 out of their last 9 games. With the defense, and it certainly went down the toilet bowl. You have yet to be able to find like those number 3 and number 4 scorers, so Jason Stony, who's been able to give you about 9.5 points per game. He's starting to step up for the team a little bit. Meanwhile, with Monmouth, they were playing a little bit less defense towards the beginning part of the season, but it's really been able to step up a little bit more. 64 points of fear surrender in 2 out of their last 4 games. Offense has been taking a little bit of a nosedive for them. They have failed to break the 70-point plateau in 3 of their last 4 games, but they're locking down a little bit more in terms of their three-point shooting defense. And when it comes to Monmouth, though this is a team that's a little bit vulnerable down low, they go up against the Campbell team that is 265th in all of college basketball with regards to rebound rate. So I did think that allows Monmouth to be able to control this game, and I did as a result make them an 8-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay 7 with Monmouth, and with this total I did set it at 138. Campbell has been a little bit better with their offense recently, but Monmouth is improved on defense. I just don't know if Campbell in the road going to be able to be consistent. So I'm going to be taking a look at this total under, and I'm willing to lay with Monmouth. 725, 726 on the betting board. Delaware, it's a road face-off against Elon. Elon is a home underdog of between 6.5 to 7 points. So on this game is 147 to 147.5. I did set Elon as an underdog of 6.5 points. So here at the 7, that is my buy point on them. Elon has been wretched in terms of their defense. They're outside the top 315 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but they actually do an okay job of being able to lock down from three-point range. Allow opponents to shoot 34.1% from 3. Now, issue with this is that they actually give up more made threes at home rather than on the road. They allow opponents to shoot 36.6% from three-point range at home. That goes to 32.5% in a road/neutral court environment. They go up against a Delaware team that has really locked it down in terms of their three-point shooting defense as well. Delaware is 56th in the country in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage. Now, overall for the Delaware defense, they are giving up about 2.6 points fewer per 100 possessions in a road/neutral court environment rather than at home. I do think that this is going to be creeping upward just a little bit. Meanwhile, Elon, 347th. That's a bit of an issue, but this is an Elon team that they really do need to be at home to be able to click on all cylinders, because this team has been really looking to bomb it from three-point range. You've got a lot of guys that they're all sort of in that pocket of between about 10 to 12 points per contest. TK Simpkins, Rob Higgins, Sam Sherry. These are all guys that have been able to give you in that neighborhood of about 10 to 12 points per game. With McKinnon, he does a solid job of being able to supply you within that neighborhood about 5 or so rebounds per game. And then Elon has been able to get a nice little boost recently with being able to have Max McKinnon shoot about 40% from three-point range, and then Rob Higgins gives you about 3 assists per contest. As a matter of fact, Higgins, McKinnon, Simpkins, they all combine to be able to give you about 8.5 assists per contest for an Elon team that does a pretty solid job of not turning the ball over. But when you look at Elon, they shoot about 39% from three-point range at home, 34.5% in a road/neutral court environment. So they're going to need to get to this Delaware perimeter defense that has been pretty solid. And with Delaware, you've got good versatility. Jair Davis has been your main man, 18.5 points, 7.5 boards. It's a Delaware team that they themselves shoot about 35.8% from three-point range, and they actually shoot better on the road rather than at home. 36.2% is their three-point shooting percentage in a road/neutral court environment, and that is part of the reason why I did set my total at 148.5. I'm going to be looking at the over. You've got also Jelon Trent doing a nice job doling it out, 8.5 points, 3.5 boards, 3.5 assists. He's been solid. Christian Ray is going to be the best rebounder in this game, being able to supply the team with 9 boards per contest, and that is a big fear for Elon in this one. It's not like Delaware is amazing with regards to rebounding, about 163rd with regards to rebound rate, but Elon has been objectively awful here, 294th, but they do have a positive rebound rate when they are at home, and I do think that Elon, on their own floor, they're going to be able to hang in there against a Delaware team that has been solid in terms of their defense, but I do think that their home and road splits is going to iron out a little bit, and I do think that Elon, a squad that has been having their struggles on offense, scoring fewer than 70 points in each of their last 4 games, but much of that coming against slower tempo teams, much of that coming on the road. This is going to be a place for them to be able to bust out a little bit. I did set my total 148.5. I do think that this comes down to late game felling, so looking at the over, and I'm willing to take 7+ here with Elon. 727, 728 on the betting board. It is UTEP, and they're facing off against Western Kentucky. Western Kentucky does find themselves as a favorite of 5 points, so on this game, it is 150.5. I did say UTEP as an underdog of 5 points. So you're at a 5.5. That is my buy point on them. UTEP is a top 5 team in the country in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, going up against a Western Kentucky team that they're looking to play fast. Western Kentucky in the top 40 in all of college basketball in terms of total possessions per game. That does cause them to get a little bit loose with it. 14 turnovers per game. Now for Western Kentucky, they've really been able to do a better job in terms of their offense. Among their top 5 players that made at least 1 3-pointer this year, 4 of them do shoot at least 36.8% from 3-point range, as you've been able to get a little bit more recently out of the duo of Deontay Allen along Christian Lander, a pair of guys that stuck with the program. They've been able to give you about 18 points per contest this season, but it's been all about Dominic Henry. 16 points, 2.5 assists from 3-point range. He is shooting at a clip of about 40.5% from 3, but he has just been on an absolute heater recently, giving the team at least 17 points in each of the team's last 6 games, but I do think that UTEP going to be able to do a nice job of being able to make this game a little bit sloppy, as the last time these two teams played, it was Western Kentucky who fell by a count of 93-87 in that game. Western Kentucky had 19 turnovers. I could see something very similar here from a UTEP team that in that game they shot about 7 of 20 from 3 and 24 of 29 at the free throw line. I do think that that's going to dry up overall for the season. UTEP shoots about 31% from distance, 69% at the free throw line. Your main scorer is Tay Hardy, who's been able to give you about 15.5 points, 2.5 assists, 2 steals per contest, and I mean this UTEP team, they've got each out of their top 6 scorers giving you at least 1.3 steals per game. That is active hands right there. They don't necessarily do the world's greatest job on the glass, but Kevin Kalu is able to give you about 5 rebounds per game. And with Western Kentucky, they actually are a top 100 team with regards to rebound rate, despite the fact that they really don't have that one tried and true big man that gives you a whole bunch of rebounds. You've got Babacar Faye, who's been able to do a nice job being able to supply this team within that neighborhood of about 4 or 5 rebounds per game. Brandon Newman has been able to give you about 6 boards per contest, but all in all, the team has been able to do a relatively solid job with that regard. You've also been able to get right around about 5.5 rebounds, 10.5 points per game out of Rodney Howard. So in terms of second and third chances, Western Kentucky going to be able to take control there. But with Western Kentucky, they've been playing games that have been all over the place. Their last 5 games, they've given up 91, 79, 65, 76, and 59 points. Meanwhile, this UTEP team, ever since that game that they did play against Western Kentucky, they've really bared down with their defense, giving up 71 points or fewer in each of the last 5 games. And I do think that this is a good spot for this UTEP team to be able to bear down, be able to play some good, strong defense, and much like they did the first time around, be able to force some turnovers. So here at the 5.5, I'm going to be willing to take the points with UTEP, and I do think that this is going to be a little bit more of an up-tempo game, but I do think that the shot making that we saw the first time around is going to dry up. I did set my total more around a 147, so diving in on the under, and going to be willing to take the points with UTEP, 729, 730 on the betting board. You don't just get William, you don't just get Mary, you get both. William and Mary plays those to Towson, and Towson is a 6.5 to a 7-point favorite with your total 130 to 130.5, and with Towson, I did make them a 7-point road favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay this number with William and Mary. This is one of the slowest teams that you're going to find in all of college basketball, but one of the most ghastly defenses that you are going to find in all of college basketball as well. William and Mary, well outside the top 325 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Now, if you're looking for a little bit of a sign of brightness when it comes to this bunch, they have been able to do a little bit of a better job of being able to guard the 3-point arc when they're at home, because for William and Mary, when they're in a roadside shoot court environment, they're one of the worst teams at being able to guard the 3-point line in all of college basketball. Meanwhile, when they return home, they allow opponents to shoot about 33.2% from 3-point range, but it's not as if this Towson team is going to be going out there and absolutely bombing it for all mankind from 3-point range, as this is a bunch that they shoot in the neighborhood about 32 to 33% from 3-point range as a collective. You've been able to have Nenda Tark give this team a nice sign of life, 11.5 points, 2.5 assists, just 1.5 steals per contest. So I do like what he's able to bring to the table for the team. And then you've had May Day with Christian May doing a solid job, being able to supply the team with about 11.5 points per contest. But this is a Towson team that sometimes they can get a little bit loose with about 11.7 turnovers per game. Doesn't sound bad, but do have to keep in mind that this team, they are very slow, they are very controlled and deliberate with regards to their approach. Meanwhile, on the flip side, you've got a William & Mary team that they've been dealing with injuries to Noah Collier, the main big man, all season long. So as a result, they have been a big liability down low. You've been able to get about 6 rebounds per game out of Caleb Dorsey, who's supplying you with 7 points per contest, was a little bit of an afterthought in previous seasons. And then you've had about 7 boards, 13 points per game out of Chase Lowe, but this team is really based around Glenn Dorsey and Trey Moss. They combine for about 27 points per game. Dorsey shoots about 38.5% from 3, but for William & Mary, they shoot about 32.5% from 3-point range. They've been getting completely carved up on the defensive side of things, and this team just does not cut it with regards to their rebound rate. 210th in all of college basketball. They have to face off against a Towson team that they are still hovering right in the neighborhood of about 14th in the country with regards to their rebound rate, with Charles Thompson being able to give you about 8 or so rebounds per game. Now, Towson does shoot less than 70% of the free throw line. That should give you a little bit of trepidation and a little bit of a nip and tuck game, but this Towson team still has been absolutely immaculate with regards to their defense, giving up fewer than 72 points in pretty much all but 3 of their games ever since their multi-team event out there in South Carolina. Meanwhile, you've got a William & Mary team that has failed to break the 65-point plateau in 3 of their last 4 games. I do think the Towson going to be able to take hold with their defense. I did set them as a 7-point favorite, so I'm going to be willing to lay the 6.5 here, and I do think that William & Mary continues to have their struggles with regards to their defense, and we have seen this Towson team be able to give you a little bit more of a sign of life with regards to their offense. They've been playing a little bit faster, and I do think that this could be close enough for late game felling. So going to be looking at the over, sub by total 133, and with Towson made them a 7-point favorite, so going to be one to lay 6.5 here. 731, 732 on the betting board. Florida Atlantic is going to be playing us to Temple. We give our O to Lane Kiffin Go Owls as the Florida Atlantic Owls are 18.5-point favorites. So your total on this game, it is 148. I feel like we just went a little bit too far here. I'm seeing a 19 out there as well. I set Florida Atlantic as an 18-point favorite. This Temple team is rough. They are very rough, to say the least, but so is this Florida Atlantic defense. Florida Atlantic, in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, is outside the top 95 in all of college basketball, and they really have been getting gashed from 3-point range. Florida Atlantic is 149th in the country in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. Now, they've been much better at home rather than on the road. They are allowing opponents to shoot about 30% from 3-point range at home. That does balloon up to 36% in a roadside shoot court environment, and you've got a Temple team that, well, they have been rough in terms of their offense. They are shooting 29.8% from 3-point range, and their top 4 scorers all are shooting below 30% from 3-point range. But you've got Micah Piccarelli along with Shane Dizone, who have both been able to shoot about 36% from 3-point range. Dizone has dealt with a little bit of injury, has come back in the last 2 games. He has supplied 24 points, 3 steals, 14 rebounds, so that's a nice little addition for this team. And Heisier Miller has been able to keep this team relatively turnover free. They only turn the ball over 10.5 turnovers per game. It just hasn't led to very good shots in general, but they've been able to do a good job keeping it clean. Meanwhile, for Florida Atlantic, Vladislav Golden has been able to do a tremendous job down low for this bunch. He's able to supply you with about a block and a half, 6+ rebounds per game, but let's call it what it is. It's all about John L. Davis being able to carry this offense. 18.5 points per contest on a 3-point shooting percentage that is currently north of 43%. As a matter of fact, it's up to 47% with what he's been able to do recently with Florida Atlantic. They're about 54th in the country in terms of rebound rate, so they're going to be able to win the battle down low. Steve Settle, he was a little bit of a versatile player while he was over at Howard last season. He's become more of a primary post player for a Temple team that, despite the fact that out of your top 4 scorers, 3 of them have been able to supply you with north of 4 rebounds per game, they're still about 260th in the country with this regard. But for Florida Atlantic, with the way that they've had a little bit of a tough time guarding the ball inside the arc as well, because with this Temple team, as we know, they have been really struggling in terms of their 3-point shooting defense. I do think that that is going to provide just enough for this Temple team to be able to hold in this game. Florida Atlantic, with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, they're clocking in right in the neighborhood about 123rd in all of college basketball. And for Temple, for everything that they have been getting oh so wrong this season, they've been doing a little bit of a better job of being able to close out, being able to give you a little bit of resistance from 3-point range in terms of their opponent's 3-point shooting percentage. This Temple team, they're more in the neighborhood of about 171st in the country, allowing opponents to shoot just 30.7% from 3-point range away from home. So I think that that does just enough for Temple to hold in this game. Semi-line at 18, so you got the 18.5 to 19. Going to be willing and take the points with Temple. I did set my total 146. Florida Atlantic, they've been picking it up a little bit more on defense, and quite frankly, to call it what it is, Temple is outside the top 250 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. Recognize that they've gotten to at least 70 points in each of their last 3 games at 69 points in 4 of their last 5, but 2 of those games went to overtime, and they played against some super duper up-tempo teams, while Florida Atlantic, they have given up north of 70 points in each of their last 3 games, but 2 of those games went to overtime to really warp those numbers. So looking at the under, and going to be willing to take 19 here with Temple go Owls. 733, 734 on the betting board. SMU, they throw it. They're facing off against Tulane, and Tulane does find themselves as a 2.5 to 3.5 point home underdog. Totals between 158.5 and 159.5. I did set Tulane as an underdog of 3.5 points. Here at the 2.5, I'm going to be willing to lay it. SMU has been very dominant in terms of their defense. Now, if you look at the raw points allowed per game, they have given up north of 70 points in now 3 out of their last 6 games, so that has been a little bit of a concern, but this team still does a really good job of guarding the arc. They're in the top 10 nationally in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, and they get the gift of going up against a Tulane team that's outside the top 320 in terms of their rebound rate. You do have a Tulane team that is going to be looking to bomb it from 3-point range. This Tulane bunch, they are shooting about 36.6% from 3-point range at home. That compares to about 33.7% when they are away from home, and Tulane has a real quartet that has been very, very solid, and I don't know what 5 is. Is that a quintet? Something like that, but 5 different guys that give you at least 12.2 points per contest. With Kobe King, give you 12 points, shooting 40% from 3-point range. Colin Holloway has been able to supply about 13 points per contest as well, but then you've got Kevin Cross, who gives you 4.5 assists, 7.5 boards, 18 points per game, and then Zion James, Jalen Forbes, they both chip in there about 14 points. They combine for a little bit over 3 steals, while James shoots 39.5% from 3, and for Tulane, a top 20 team in the country in terms of total possessions per game, they do turn it over just 10.5 times per contest. Meanwhile, for SMU, they've been able to upgrade their 3-point shooting with the fact that Chuck Harris has been able to shoot about 40% from 3, giving you 13 points. He does a very good job of helping out Zariq Phelps, who he only shoots about 22.5% from 3. And for SMU, Harris is the only guy that averages north of 6.1 points per contest that shoots above 23% from 3. Yet as a collective, they shoot about 34.2% from 3 because you do have ancillary pieces like a BJ Edwards giving you about 4.5 points, a steal, 3.5 assists per game. Ricardo Wright gives you 6 points. He's a nice designated 3-point shooter at about 35.5%. You've got a lot of guys that they do a really good job of just knowing their role in terms of this team. SMU has been a top 50 team in terms of their rebound rate as well, having Tariq Smith giving you about 6 boards, Samuel Williamson about 7.5 boards per contest as well. And SMU, they do a nice job of being able to value the ball. Last time these 2 teams played, it was SMU who was able to get the job done, though it was not a cover, that by a count of 80-76 at home, as in that game SMU did shoot just 6 of 26 from 3-point range, and in that game Tulane only turned the ball over 7 times. I do think that SMU is going to be able to get just a little bit more pressure on the ball. They are a top 75 team with regards to turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and for SMU ever since then, they have not allowed more than 69 points in a game. They've given up between 68 and 69 points in all 3 games ever since then, so I do think that for this SMU team, they're going to be able to continue on that relatively solid defense. I do think that we see a little bit more sloppiness to be able to help you out with an under in this spot. So I might total 155.5, and with SMU, 1 to lay up to 3 with them. Set them as a 3.5 point favorite. 735, 736 on the betting board. Wichita State, it's a road face off against East Carolina. East Carolina does find themselves as a 1 to 1.5 point favorite. Your total on this game, it is 137. I did set Wichita State as a underdog in this spot of 3 points. I'm going to be willing to lay the 1 to 1.5 with East Carolina. East Carolina has done a really nice job of just being able to knuckle up, for lack of a better term, in terms of their defense. Out of conference, they are outside the top 200 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but those numbers were very misleading because they were playing for quite a bit of non-conference play, with Brandon Johnson being just bothered by illness when he was out there, and then he was missing for a few games as well, and he's been really their best defender. 13.5 points, 8.5 boards, CO.5 per contest, shoots 35.5% from 3, and East Carolina has done a very nice job of just being able to slow down games. Meanwhile, this Wichita State team, they were looking to play a little bit more up-tempo towards the beginning part of the season. They've fallen more into a mid-tempo game. They're about 110th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Meanwhile, you've got an East Carolina team that's about 309th, and they do have a nice point guard in Bobby Pettiford, who's been able to do a nice job. He's been able to supply the team within that neighborhood of about 3.5 assists per contest. Does a nice job just holding on to it. 1.2 turnovers per contest. Doesn't necessarily shoot it well from 3, but he's backed up by a trio of guys, and Johnson, who I mentioned before, RJ Felton, and Ezra Uzar, who have all been able to give you at least 5 rebounds per game to be able to keep East Carolina lively on on the glass, and that's going to be big because you've got a Wichita State team that you do have a trio of guys that I'll give you at least 5.8 rebounds per game. As Wichita State, they are 83rd in the country in terms of their rebound rate, as been able to have Dallin Reginald, Quincy Baylor, along with Kenny Poto be able to combine for about 19 rebounds per game. But with Wichita State, you just don't really have a lot of pop from three-point range. They only shoot about 31.9% from the outside. Meanwhile, for Wichita State, they're about 132nd in the country in terms of their opponent's three-point shooting percentage. So they've been able to do a solid job of being able to hold up there. Meanwhile, East Carolina, they do a nice job cutting off the arc. Opponents are only shooting about 30.9% from three-point range at home against them. That is a top 75 mark in all of college basketball. So I do think that in this ordeal, you are going to be able to see a very nice performance from East Carolina. I do think that they're going to do a nice job of slowing down a Wichita State team that it does feel like they are looking to play a little bit more defense-oriented. They're looking at their top scorer, Kobe Rogers, giving them 15.5 points per contest, and they're relying upon him to be able to develop a lot of offense. But in regulation, because their game that they played against Florida Atlantic then went to overtime, they have been held to 74 points or fewer in 3 of their last 4 games. Meanwhile, for East Carolina, this team has done a nice job rising up with their defense. 71 points or fewer surrendered in 4 of their last 5 games. Lone exception was giving up 73 points against a bunch in UTSA that's one of the most up-tempo and crazy teams in all of college basketball. So did make East Carolina the favorite of 3 points. I'm going to be willing to lay with them. And in terms of total, I did set my total at 139. I do think that you get a rather controlled game, but at the same time, I do think that this game is lively enough for late game falling. We have seen this Wichita State team be able to get to at least 68 points so far in their last 5 games. So going to be taking a look at that over, and I'm going to be taking a look at East Carolina willing to lay up to 2.5 with them. 737, 738 on the betting board. It is UTSA. Meet me for the Roadrunners in the road face-off against Charlotte. And Charlotte does find themselves as big favorites of between 13 to 14 points. Totals between 145.5 and 146. Battle of the tortoise and the hare. Charlotte in the bottom 40 in terms of total possessions per game in all of college basketball. UTSA, they are a top 30 team, and UTSA has really been able to kick up their offense recently. Ever since they've gotten Jordan Ivy Curry active, he's been able to really supply the boom. 17.5 points per contest, but first 2 games, he just really wasn't able to find his footing. You could tell that he was just out of sorts trying to be able to find his rhythm, but ever since then he's been logging 18 plus points per contest. He's been able to shoot 38% from three-point range. For UTSA, you have really no qualms about the offense. They're only turning the ball over about 11.3 times per contest. They're averaging darn near 80 points per game, but they just have not been able to guard a soul this season. They're outside the top 270 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They go up against a Charlotte team that does a really nice job of just staying in control of themselves as well. You've got someone in Igor Milicic who's done a nice job being able to supply you with about 8.5 rebounds per game. He stands in the neighborhood about 6'10". He's been able to shoot 38% from three-point range, 13 points, 1.3 blocks per contest. Just a very complete player in general. Now, for UTSA, they're a relatively solid team with regards to rebound rate. Carlton Lindgard has been able to give you about 6 rebounds per contest. You've been able to have quite a few guys like a Dre Fuller be able to give you about 5 rebounds per game, so they don't necessarily do a bad job there. But going up against a Charlotte team that they just know who they are. They know how to be able to just get things into their tempo and just be able to play their style while being able to just guard the arc in general as well. Charlotte, they are 30th in the country in opponents' three-point shooting percentage at home. Teams are only shooting about 28.5% from three-point range against them. I do think that that's going to cause for a massive speed bump against the UTSA team that has been playing at warp speed, and as a result, I did set my total 144.5, diving in on the under, and with the way that Charlotte has been able to control the three-point line, I do think that they get it done. Set Charlotte as a 14.5 point favorite, so I'm going to be willing to lay the number, and I'm going to be taking a look at the under. 739, 740 on the betting board. It is UNC Wilmington. They play host to North Carolina A&T, and A&T does find themselves as a underdog in this ordeal of 21.5 to 22 points. Your total on this game, it is 142.5 to 143. I did set Wilmington as a favorite of 18.5 points. I'm going to be willing to take the north of 20. For UNC Wilmington, while this offense has been very good and efficient, they're a top 5 team in the country in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. This Wilmington defense just has not been the same that it has been in past years. Wilmington outside the top 200 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and they are 287th in the country in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage. So I am going to be willing to take the points with North Carolina A&T. Now, the biggest snag that you have for North Carolina A&T is that they have been dealing with injuries, and more specifically, they've been dealing with an injury to their top scorer in Landon Glasper. Glasper has not played the last few games, and he has been by far the top performer for this team, being able to log about 21.3 points per game. We have not seen him yet in the month of February, but you do have supporting pieces that are give this team a little bit of a boost. Towards the beginning part of the season, they were without Jason Murphy, and he has been by far the top rebounder for this team, being able to supply about 6.5 rebounds per game for a team that's outside the top 250 in terms of their rebound rate. And then you've been able to have good production out of Kamion Shell, who's been able to give you 12.5 points, 4.5 assists per contest. I do like his overall game for an A&T team that they only turn the ball over 9.5 times per game. While they're not quite the same as Wilmington in terms of turnovers per possession, they're actually not too far off from them. They just haven't been able to develop good shots. They're shooting 30% from three. They are only shooting about 39.7% from the floor, but they do go up against a UNC Wilmington team that they have given up at least 74 points in 3 of their last 5 games. That includes a game against Campbell. Offense has certainly been getting it going, at least 75 points each of their last 5 games, and they go up against an A&T team that is a bottom 50 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. It has been relatively rough for them, and for Tazarian White, he has been tremendous for this Wilmington team. 20 points, 7 boards, shoots 36% from 3 for a Wilmington bunch as a whole. They do shoot about 35.7% from 3-point range. This team has been efficient in terms of their offense, both at home and when they step out onto a road/shoot recording environment. As for UC Wilmington, it's been very interesting. They have been able to shoot actually a little bit better from 3-point range when they've been away from home rather than when they have been at home. And if you take a look at the boost that they get in terms of their offense, in terms of points scored per possession at home versus away from home, it's only about a 4.5 point boost. So I do think that while North Carolina A&T is going to continue to struggle, and man, it has been unsightly for them, I do think that lying north of 20, it's just gotten a little bit too far with a Wilmington team where I do have my question marks in terms of this defense. I did set my total at 140.5 with this A&T team. They have really been slowing down ever since they have had Glasper out of the fold. As a matter of fact, this team has scored 65 points or fewer in every game that he's been out of the fold. Meanwhile, defense has actually stepped up, giving up 70 points or fewer in 3 of their last 5 games, so going to be willing to take a look at the under and north of 20 here with A&T. 741, 742 on the betting board. Old Dominion is going to be playing us to Louisiana. Louisiana is a 4.5 to a 3.5 point favorite. Your total on this game between 148.5 and 149, and with Louisiana, I did set them as a favorite of 4 points. Between the 3.5 and a 4, I'd rather lay a 3.5 rather than take a 4.5. This Old Dominion team has been rough, to say the least. They're outside the top 275 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. You feel nothing but bad for what is happening with their coach and Jeff Jones, who I know is dealing with some health struggles, to say the least. And for this Louisiana team, certainly has been all sorts of inconsistent for them thus far this season. But for Louisiana, on defense, they're starting to really come to the forefront, and they're starting to be able to give you a little bit more than just being able to guard the perimeter, because they have done a good job of being able to guard the arc all season long. A top 10 team in the country with that regard, but now they're doing a better job on the interior. They're giving up 72 points or fewer in 4 of their last 5 games. You've got Kobe Julian, who's been a nice, well-rounded player, give you about 4.5 boards, 18 points per game, and it's really been via turnovers that this defense has been able to rise up. Each other top 5 scorers give you at least 1.2 steals per contest, while this Louisiana team, they do shoot about 37% from 3, going up against an Old Dominion team that has been brutal in terms of hitting the glass. They're outside the top 250 in terms of their rebound rate, and they're 298th in opponent's 3-point shooting percentage, which it does drop to more like 33% at home compared to about 38% in a roadside shoot court environment. And for Old Dominion, it's not the world's worst offense. You've had Chauncey Jenkins along with Vashon Alouette be able to combine for about 33.5 points per contest, but now you've got Alouette, who's currently dealing with injuries, so that means that Chauncey Jenkins really needs to vibe with Tyrone Smith in the backcourt, who's been able to step up. To his credit, 12 plus points in each of the team's last 4 games, 7 plus boards in 4 of the last 5 as well, so he's been able to give this team a nice little boost. But for Old Dominion, that does drop their 3-point shooting as well, as Williams only shoots about 28% from 3-point range, going up against the Louisiana team that they've been able to do a tremendous job in terms of their offense, getting to at least 80 in 3 of their last 4 games. And for this Old Dominion bunch, just been an almighty struggle without having Alouette in the fold in terms of their offense. In their last 3 games, they have struggled to get to 65 points, and much of them, 2 of their last 3, they have struggled to be able to get there. So a circumstance where I did set my total out of 150 despite the Alouette injury, just because I do think that this could be a game close enough for late game filling, and I do think the Louisiana going to be able to take hold of it. I'm going to be willing to lay this number with Louisiana, made them a 4-point favorite, and taking a look at the total over 743, 744 on the betting board. It is Georgia Southern, and they throw the facing off against Coastal Carolina. Coastal Carolina does find themselves as a pick-em to a 1-point favorite, and your total on this game, it is 152. I did set Coastal Carolina as a favorite of 3 points. So here on this pick-em line, I am going to be willing to take them. For Coastal Carolina, they've been very inconsistent with regards to their offense, but you're really able to say that for both teams. Georgia Southern has just dealt with injuries all season long, and they are outside the top 300 with regards to rebound rate. They're outside the top 275 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, as really nobody other than Avante Parker has been able to give this Georgia Southern team north of 5 rebounds per contest. So that's a big issue that you've got for this team. Meanwhile, you've got a flip side of Coastal Carolina who's been able to do a very nice job of being able to have Jacob Meyer along with Kylan Blackman be able to help you on the backcourt with a combined about 15 points, 2.5 steals per contest, and Meyer now shooting about 38.5% from three-point range. Down low, they should have an advantage with Janika Ojiako being able to give you about 10.5 rebounds per game. Coast Carolina also well outside the top 150 with regards to rebound rate, but still, you have someone like a Kevin Easley who's got some versatility, 5 boards, nearly a steal, shoots threes, not necessarily well, but shoots threes, and then you've got a 46.5% three-point shooter in Jimmy Nichols, who's been out of the fold for quite a while, but he was able to give the team a little bit of versatility when he was out there as well, and he's been able to pass the torch to the man that's been able to take his place in Braden McVicar, who's 6'11", currently shooting 40% from three. Ever since we have seen that injury, he's been able to step up, as in the last 4 games, he's been able to supply this team with about 9.3 points per contest, so he's been able to step up a little bit for a Coastal Carolina team that does turn the ball over 13 times per contest. Coastal Carolina, another team that's outside the top 250 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Both of these teams have some similar struggles. Coastal Carolina only shoots about 31% from three, 65% at the free throw line. Meanwhile, Tyron Moore, he does have to give you more for Georgia Southern. He's been by far their top scorer, 15 points, shoots about 40% from three-point range, but all in all, it's a Georgia Southern team that they turn the ball over 13.5 times per contest as well, and I do think that going on the road is going to be a little bit difficult for them, especially with Georgia Southern having allowed at least 78 points in each of their last 4 games, and this Coastal Carolina team, they themselves have given up at least 79 in each of their last 5 games, so good old situation of something's got to give. I did set my total at 149, while both of these teams have been horrific on defense. Neither of these teams have been amazing on offense either, so I'm going to be thinking that things iron out a little bit, looking at the under of the Coastal Carolina, willing to lay up to 2.5 points with them, set them as a 3-point favorite. 745, 746 on the betting board. Jacksonville State is on the road facing off against Louisiana Tech, and Louisiana Tech is a 10.5 to an 11-point favorite. And your total on this game is between 130 and 130.5. With this total, I did set it at a 131. Just looking to go over. Louisiana Tech has been a top 75 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. As a matter of fact, a top 40 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and should be able to do a nice job winning that battle down low with Daniel Bacho. Give me 14.5 points, 10.5 rebounds per game. But I've been thoroughly impressed by the way that Jacksonville State has been able to hold their own on glass. They don't have that guy like a Daniel Bacho who's able to really manhandle things down low. As a matter of fact, they don't have a single guy in the roster that gives you north of 6 rebounds per game. But despite that, this Jacksonville State team, they rank 40th in the country with regards to their rebound rate, but they just don't have the same pop on offense that Louisiana Tech does. Tech has been able to shoot 36% from three-point range. Your top 2 players have made at least 1 3, Tariq Chavez along with Isaiah Crawford. They've been able to combine for about 29 points per contest. They're both shooting north of 40% from three-point range, and Crawford does chip in their 2.3 steals per game, and that could be the undoing for Jacksonville State, a team that does turn the ball over about 13.5 times per contest. Kai Tandy, he's had to do it all for this bunch, 18.5 points. He shoots about 38.5% from three-point range, so he's really been able to step up and give the team some much-needed offense, because nobody else has really been able to do that for this Jacksonville State team. And for Jacksonville State, in terms of their overall offensive efficiency, this has been one of the more brutal teams in college basketball. Currently, in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, 261st in the country. Now, they do experience only about a 1.5 fall off when they're in a road/shoot-score environment, but for Louisiana Tech, this team is more around 170th. They do have guys that are able to come in off the bench like a Drayvon Magnum and is able to knock down a few threes. I do think that for Jacksonville State as well, this is just a little bit of a rough matchup in general. For Jacksonville State, this team has not been able to exceed the 65-point plateau in 2 of their last 3 games, so they've been at a little bit of rough form, and the last time these 2 teams played, Jacksonville State got to just 57 points. Louisiana Tech, despite going just 5 of 14 from three-point range, dominated that game 74-57, winning the turnover battle. I do see something similar happening here. I did set my total 131. I do think that the turnovers, they get cut down on just a little bit more for enough clean possessions for and over, but I did set Louisiana Tech as an 11-point favorite here at the 10.5. Want to lay the number and going to be taking a look at this total over 747, 748 on the betting board. Northeastern plays host to College of Charleston, and Charleston is a favorite of between 3.5 to 4 points. 154.5 to 155.5 is your total. With Charleston, I did set them as a favorite of 4 points here at the 3.5. I'm going to be willing to lay it. With Northeastern, they've actually done an amazing job down low, a top 25 defense in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, but they are a team that really gives it up from three-point range outside the top 300 in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, going up against a College of Charleston team that has been able to ascend with their offense. Not an amazing team from three-point range, though. Rain Smith, he's still been able to rein it in. He's been able to shoot in the high 30s from three-point range, shipping in there about 11.5 points per contest. Ante Barazovic, along with Ben Burnham, they combine for a little bit over 25 points, 11 rebounds per game, and Charleston doesn't generate the same amount of turnovers as they did last season. Last season, they were very good with that regard. This year, they're outside the top 250. They still are playing at that harebrained, up-tempo style that has allowed them to be so good with their offense. They're 9th in the country in terms of points scored on a per-possession basis. And if you look at Charleston on the road, they experience close to no drop-off in terms of their offense. They're a top 15 team in the country in terms of points scored on a per-possession basis in a roadside-shoot-record environment, going up against a Northeastern team that's actually going to be able to win the battle down low. Northeastern is a top 80 team with regards to rebound rate, with Chris Rorty being the only guy that gives you north of 5.1 rebounds per game, but 13.5 points, 7 boards, 2.5 assists per game. He's got some relatively good versatility for Northeastern. They are a team that's outside the top 250 in terms of total possessions per game, though, and they have been really scuffling in terms of just being able to take care of the ball. They shoot in the mid-30s from three-point range. They could use some more out of that backcourt, as Joe Pridgeon has been in and out of the fold all season long, only giving you 9 points when he's out there. Lucas Dakota gives you 11 points, shoots about 32.5% from three-point range, but I do think that for College of Charleston, their weaknesses really not being completely exposed in this game, because this is a College of Charleston team that they're going to give you some open looks from three-point range, especially on the road, allowing opponents to shoot 35.3% from three-point range. That allows them to take control of this game. And I do think that we've went just a touch too far in terms of this total. I did set my total 152. College of Charleston, they are playing up-tempo, but I think that with Northeastern wasting so many possessions, and with Northeastern playing so slow, that keeps the total under. I did set my total 152, so diving in on the under, and I am going to be willing to lay up to 3.5 with Charleston. 749, 750 on the betting board. It is Drexel playing host to Hofstra. The pride of Hofstra does find themselves as a 3.5 to a 4-point underdog. Total between 132 and 132.5. With Hofstra, I made them an underdog of 3.5 points, so going to be willing to take the 4. It's all about, do you like low post play, or do you like the perimeter in this game? Because you've got a Drexel team that ranks in the top 25 nationally with regards to the rebound rate. They do a very good job of being able to shore things up down low. Meanwhile, they're going up against a Hofstra team that has been incredible with regards to their offense in the backcourt, as you've got a pair of guys, Tyler Thomas, Tarleton Dunbar. They've been able to supply the team with about 39 points per contest. With Thomas, he shoots about 36% from three. Dunbar, about 40% from three. But Hofstra, about 300th in the country with regards to their rebound rate. To the credit of Hofstra, they only turned the ball over about 10.8 times per contest. And for Hofstra, it's been touch and go with regards to the defense, but it's really stepped up recently in this 4-game win streak, giving up 71 points or fewer in each out of the last 4. Meanwhile, for Drexel, it looked like they were hitting Mach turbo in terms of their offense, but all of a sudden, they have really hit the brakes late December, early January. They were getting to 70 on the regular. Now they have scored 70 or fewer in each of their last 5 games, as this bunch just really doesn't shoot it well from three-point, shooting about 32.7% from the outside. Justin Moore, he tries to give you more with about a steal, 3.5 assists, 12.5 points per game, but they're really based around Amari Williams, who does it all. 1.7 blocks, 12 points, 8 boards. Just a big reason why the team has been so good down low, but even though you do have guys like a Landon House who's able to shoot about 37% from three-point range, Mato Koros, who shoots 40% from three, they just don't give you consistent scoring. Now, I will say this about Drexel. They do a nice job of being able to guard the arc as well. They're 61st in the country in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage, and that declines all the way down to 26% when they're at home. But, I mean, the way to be able to beat this Hofstra team is both down low and via the perimeter, and with Hofstra being able to not have to worry as much about these guys on the outside, I do think that that's going to keep them lively, and I do think that Hofstra is going to be able to crank things up just a little bit more in this game, and I do think that this game is close enough for late game felling, as you're not going to have a lot of wasted possessions. Both of these teams don't do a good job of being able to generate turnovers. So did sell my total 135.5. I'm going to be looking at the over, and with Drexel, made them a favorite of 3.5 points, so going to be won't take 4 with Hofstra. 751, 752 on the betting board. Middle Tennessee is going to be playing us in New Mexico State, and New Mexico State is a 3-point underdog. Totals between 130.5 and 132. I actually made New Mexico State the 1-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take a look at them outright on the money line. This is a Middle Tennessee team that I just have not been a believer in all season long. They lost a lot of their backcourt towards the beginning part of the season with the Cameron Weston injury, and ever since then, it's just been a disjointed mess in offense. Now, recognize that New Mexico State literally had to replace everyone from last year due to that hazing ordeal, but that said, when it comes to New Mexico State, they've been able to find their footing a little bit more. They've had their struggles. They are about 328th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, but it's right on par with them. Middle Tennessee, 356th in all of college basketball in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, and you've got the best player on the floor, in my opinion, on the side of New Mexico State, and Femi Odekale, who's been able to give you about 11 points, 6 boards, 3 assists. Not a guy that's really going to pop it from three-point range, but whatever the game calls for, he's able to give you a little bit of something. Elias King, he's been the best scorer out there for Middle Tennessee. He and Jevin Porter have been able to combine for about 26 points per contest, with King shoots 35.5% from three, but for Middle Tennessee, they shoot 66.3% the free throw line, 28.5% from three, all while turning the ball over 14.7 times per game while being a low-tempo team. More of a mid-tempo team in New Mexico State, still sloppy, but 13 turnovers per contest while shooting 33% from three and 71% at the free throw line. This team just executes a little bit better on the offensive side of things. Both of these teams, they've got their issues on the glass. Robert Carpenter has only been able to give you about 4 boards per contest for New Mexico State, but Kalu Azugi has been able to chip in there about 6 rebounds per game. Jared Coleman-Jones, meanwhile, for Middle Tennessee, he's giving you about 9.5 points, 7.5 boards, and at 6'10", his 40% three-point shooting is actually leading the way for this team. He's been popping a few more threes. That's been working out a little bit better for a Middle Tennessee team that they have so badly needed a spark on offense, and they've been able to get to at least 68 points in 3 out of the last 5 games. Doesn't sound like much, but I mean, it's a little bit of improvement, and these two teams, they squared off in January, and you did see New Mexico State win that game 73-62. They were Middle Tennessee. They shot 10 of 33 from 3, and that's pretty much their season average. New Mexico State did a better job of being able to take care of the ball, and for New Mexico State, they were able to win the battle. I do expect a lot of the same things that we saw night number 1 when these two teams played to happen here. New Mexico State only about 277th in the country with regards to rebound rate, but Middle Tennessee, they're about 220th. I do think that it's going to be a relative stalemate, and with New Mexico State being able to take better control of the ball, I do think that allows them to be able to get the job done in a low-scoring slog. I set my total 129. Looking at the under, I like New Mexico State outright on the money line, made them a 1-point favorite. 753, 754 on the bang board. Sam Houston State plays those to Florida International. Florida International is a 6.5-point underdog. Your total is 147. With Florida International, I did set them as a 10-point dog. I am going to be willing to lay with Sam Houston State. Key for Sam Houston State, taking care of the balls. Florida International is a top 5 team with regards to turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and Ontario Dean leads the country in terms of steals. 12.5 points, 4.1 assists, 3.6 steals, and about 5 rebounds per game. Problem is, he's the only guy on the roster that averages more than 3.6 rebounds per game for International. They are well outside the top 325 in terms of their rebound rate. And it's not to say that Sam Houston State is some sort of a juggernaut on the glass, but Sam Houston State about 138th in terms of their rebound rate. Sam Houston State has had a few issues taking care of the ball, about 13 times per contest is how many times they turn it over, but Jaden Ray, he's been able to be a big part of this team in terms of facilitation, being able to give about 4 assists per contest. Shoots in that neighborhood about 34% from 3-point range. Now, has been dealing with a little bit of a nagging injury, but was able to return against Jacksonville State just briefly on the 8th of February. It sounds like he's going to try to give it a go. I do think that he's going to be much less than 100% if he does go in this game. So that has been accounted for. You've got a guy that is able to shoot about 40% from 3-point range, though, in Damon Nicholas, who's been able to do a nice job giving the team just what you need. A steal and a half, 8 boards, 6 boards out of Nicholas, and then Lamar Wilkerson has led the way with about 14 points at a steal per contest. It is a Florida national team that, while they do a nice job of being able to generate those turnovers, by the way, they turn the ball over 14 times per game as well. They only shoot about 34% from 3. You've been able to have Javante Hawkins shoot 40% from 3, supply about 12 points per contest, but really past that, you don't have a lot of support for Ontario Dean. And Florida National, they have had their big, giant issues on offense, scoring 68 points or fewer in each of the last 4 games. The 68 that they scored was when they played against Sam Houston State about a week and a half ago. That was a game where Florida National got the win 68-61. In that game, Sam Houston State lost the turnover battle 16-6. I do think that irons out, as Sam Houston State in that game won the rebound battle by 20. I think that Sam Houston State is able to play a little bit more even up with regards to turnover battle and be able to get revenge. I did set Sam Houston State as a 10-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number, and I did set my total at 144. I do think that we're going to be seeing things be a bit more up-tempo and a bit more high-scoring than we saw the first time around, but I do think that Florida National is really being figured out in terms of their offense, and they're throttling down their tempo. So looking at the under, and I'm willing to lay with Sam Houston State. 755, 756 is the DK Network right up. We've got Abilene Christian on the road facing off against UT Rio Grande Valley. Grand Valley is an underdog of 1.5 at home, and your total on this game is 148. My write-up is going to be on the total. I set this total at a 155.5. You've got a pair of teams that are just absolutely running it and gunning it. Both of these teams are in the top 50 nationally in terms of total possessions per game. Meanwhile, you've got yourself a Abilene Christian team that has been really scuffling in terms of the way that they give up shots on the interior. And really both of these teams are, for that matter. As for Abilene Christian, 273rd in the country in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. UT Rio Grande Valley, 278th with this regard. You've you've got both of these teams that really struggle from three-point range, which that's going to be able to hurt them offensively. You've got the Vaqueros, 337th in the country, shooting 29.1% from three-point range. Abilene Christian, 226th in the country in terms of three-point shooting percentage, but neither of these teams rely upon three. So even though both of these teams stink from three, it doesn't matter as much in this game because both of these teams really allow a lot on the interior, and neither of these teams rely too much on their scoring from three-point range. Abilene Christian, 340th in the country in terms of percentage of their points that come from three. So most would be number one, least would be 362nd, just for reference. Meanwhile, Grand Valley, they only get 21% of their points from made threes. That is 351st out of 362 teams. So both of these teams have zero reliance on the three-point shot. And you've got a Rio Grande Valley team that in their last 21 games against D1 opponents, they've allowed 74 points because they play at warp speed. 9th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, while they rank 254th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and second chances are going to be aplenty. Both of these teams ranked outside the top 300 with regards to their defensive rebound rate. Now, you do have your trepidation with regards to both of these teams because, well, they have been stinky to say the least, and a big reason why I'm going to be willing to also back Abilene Christian in this spot is I did set them as a favorite of 3.5 points, so I'm going to be willing to lay the small number here is that you've been dealing with quite a few ailments on the side of this Grand Valley team. With Grand Valley, they were able to get a lot out of Sam Abdul Hakim, who was able to give you about 14 points, shooting 39.5% from three. He's out due to injury, and that means that each of your top five scorers are going to be active for this game, are all shooting below 32% from three-point range. You've been able to get some good production, though, out of Mr. Elijah Elliott, 16 points, 3 boards per contest. Meanwhile, for Abilene Christian, this is one of the top teams in the country in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, with having Arion Simmons along with Lee Abdul-Diba be able to combine for about 28.5 points per contest. And for the Abilene Christian team, they've been able to have Hunter Jack Madden be able to shoot about 40% from three-point range, supplying about 11.5 points per contest. It's a whole greater than some of its parts venture. Meanwhile, for Grand Valley, they're looking to do that as well, but with the some of its parts currently being out due to injury, I think that this team is going to be getting completely lambasted on defense. It is an Abilene Christian team that has fallen on some tough times with their offense. They have scored fewer than 70 points in regulation in each of the last 4 games, but very tough stretch of teams that they were playing against. I do think that both of these teams are going to have their dormant offenses awake. My DK Network write-up pick is going to be on the over of the Abilene Christian. Made them a 3.5 point favorite, so going to be one to lay up to 3 with them. 757, 758 on the betting board. It is Morehead State, and they hit the road to face off against Little Rock. Little Rock does find themselves as a underdog of 4 points. Your total on this game between 142 and 142.5. With Little Rock, I did set them as an underdog of 4 points. So you're at 4.5. I'm going to be willing to take those points. It's a Little Rock bunch that has been quite fascinating in terms of the way that they've been able to play, as they've been able to do a nice job of cutting down on the turnovers, down to about 12 per contest. You've been able to have KK Robinson be able to headline things along Jameer Champlin. These two guys both give you about 16 points apiece, and then between the two of them, you've been able to get about 13 rebounds. Robinson doles out about 5 assists, shoots about 32.5% from three-point range. For a Little Rock team as a whole, they shoot about 33.5% from the outside. The big thing for this team, though, is that they're probably going to have a little bit of a tough time down low against a Morehead State team that has been one of your best rebound rate teams in all of college basketball. Morehead State has been able to completely dominate with that regard. They are clocking in 20th in the country in terms of the rebound rate. Meanwhile, Little Rock, they're about 141st. For Morehead State, your top rebounder has been Riley Mnix, who provides all sorts of versatility, 19.5 points, 9.5 boards, shoots about 32% from three, but you also have Jordan Lathan, who gives you 6.5 boards, 16 points, shoots 39% from three, and then you've got Khalil Thomas, who shoots 40% from the outside. And out of your top 5 scorers for this Morehead State team, actually your top 6 scorers for Morehead State, 5 of them give you at least 4.3 rebounds per game. So the 12.2 turnovers per game, it's lower than it has been in past years. You'd like to see it be coming down just a little bit, but Morehead State is really controlling things with their defense. Ever since conference play has began, this team has allowed north of 70 points in none of their games since the turn of the calendar, and they did allow a 70 spot against North Alabama in December. That was December 10th. That is the last time that a team has broken 70 points against them. So Morehead State doing a good job of being able to control things there. Meanwhile, it is a Little Rock team that has been able to rise up with their defense. They've actually given up fewer than 70 points in each out of the last 5 games, but by nature, this is a Little Rock team that is really looking to push tempo. I do think that they're going to try to get Morehead State a little bit out of sorts. This has been a Little Rock team that has been able to get some better three-point shooting out of the likes of Chaplin and company, and I do think that this game does turn a little bit up-tempo. I do think that Little Rock tries to get things played a little bit more at their terms. So I did set my total 144. Here at the 142, I'm going to be looking at the over. And with regards to Morehead State, going to make them a 4-point favorite, so going to be looking at the 4.5 with Little Rock. 759, 760 on the betting board. South Alabama is going to be playing us to Texas State, and Texas State does find themselves as a 1.5 point underdog with your total 137 to 137.5. And with South Alabama, I did make them the favorite of 1.5 points. You're at the 2. That is my buy point on Texas State. Texas State has been able to rise up a bit more after it was a very brutal start to the season for them. Texas State now has Colton Benson, who's able to give this team a little bit of outside pop. He's been able to shoot 43% from three-point range, supplying 7.5 points per contest after he was out for the first 10 or so games of the season due to the two-time transfer issue. And for Texas State, they've needed every bit of that offense. As in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, they're 329th in all of college basketball, but they're also going up against the South Alabama team that, for one, is just absolutely bleeding points. South Alabama, outside the top 250 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and they face off against a very random Texas State team that, over the last few years, they've actually had more success when they've been on the road rather than at home. That's ironed out a little bit more this year, where they're giving up about 7 points more per 100 possessions when they leave home rather than when they are at home, but that has been of very big intrigue to take a look at over the last few years with them. Meanwhile, you take a look at what you're able to get out of this bunch in South Alabama, and you don't necessarily have a lot of consistency on the glass either. They're well outside the top 250 with regards to rebound rate. Texas State more around 158th. That's Thomas Howell. It's the only guy in the roster that gives you north of 4 boards per contest. Comes in from Louisiana Monroe. Maxwell Land, the transfer from St. Francis of Pennsylvania, has been dealing with injuries, so it's been all about getting some production out of Isaiah Gator, along with also Terrell Jones. Both of these guys have been able to shoot between 36 to 37% from three-point range. You're combining for about 27 points per contest, but past that, you don't have a single other guy that really gives you north of 9.5 points per game. And for South Alabama, it's just been a mess for the team all season long in terms of their defense, giving up at least 74 points in 3 of their last 5 games. Now, looked better in the last 2 games, but that was against Georgia Southern and Northern Illinois, 2 legitimately bottom 50 teams in all of college basketball. While Texas State, they've gotten things rolling, 4 straight wins. They have allowed 66 points or fewer in each of their last 5 games, including a 74 to 66 win first time around against South Alabama. I do think that we are going to be seeing South Alabama reverse that just a little bit in that game. Texas State shot 8 of 16 from three-point range, but I do think that this is going to be a nip and tuck game where Texas State does win the rebound battle, but I think that South Alabama just has just enough in the backcourt, but I don't want to lay anything more than 1.5 with them. Getting 2, going to be looking at those points with Texas State. I do think that this is going to be a little bit of a lower scoring slog with the way that Texas State has been able to step up on defense, but I do think that this has a propensity for late game fouling. Something I told 137.5, so you're at the 137.5, looking over and looking at 2 here with Texas State. 761, 762 on the betting board. North Texas plays us in Memphis. Memphis is an underdog of a point total on this game, is 136. I did set North Texas as a favorite of 1.5 points. You're at the 1, I'm going to be willing to lay it. With Memphis, they've got by far more talent in this game, but they're playing like a bunch of knuckleheads right now. As for this bunch, you've had some actually halfway decent facilitation out of Javon Quinterly. He's not really the issue in my opinion. 5 assists at 2.3 turnovers per game. He's went out there, he's giving you 13.5 points per contest, shooting 36.5% from 3. He's been fine. It's the rest of the guys that have not been able to step up. Having Caleb Mills out due to an injury has been rough. Jaden Hardaway not being able to take those strides forward. You would like to see a little bit more of Jaquan Walton, who gives you 9 points on 29% three-point shooting, and for this North Texas team, they have an innate ability to just be able to get games played at their terms. They are one of the slowest teams in all of college basketball. They've got a nice go-to scorer in Jason Edwards, who's been able to supply 18 points, shooting in the neighborhood about 35.5% from three-point range. And all in all, this North Texas team, they do turn the ball over 11.7 times per game, which doesn't sound like much, but when you play it at as slow of a tempo as they do, that actually is a little bit of significance. But they do shoot nearly 37% from three-point range with North Texas. They're also a much better offensive team at home rather than on the road. They're averaging 17.9 points more per 100 possessions when they're at home rather than in a roadside-shoot-record environment, and they're going up against a Memphis team that has been getting absolutely gash. For Memphis, they are outside the top 125 in terms of points allowed on a per-possession basis, and they're giving you a lot of quality looks from inside the arc. Now, with regards to Memphis and their three-point shooting defense, they're about 34% both at home and in a roadside-shoot-record environment. They're actually averaging more points per possession on the road rather than at home, which I do find that to be a very big fascination, but I do think that this North Texas team is going to be able to do a nice job down low, despite the fact that you've got Davie Jones, the top scorer for this Memphis team, supplying 6 boards, 21.5 points per contest. I do think that Robert Allen being able to supply 7 boards per contest, Aaron Scott being able to give you 6 rebounds per game, that's going to be just enough against a Memphis team that's outside the top 125 in terms of their rebound rate. With North Texas, they're about 89th, and with Mule Sissoko being able to give you about a block per contest, that allows North Texas, in my opinion, to get the job done on their home floor and be able to get this game played at a little bit bit more of their style. I did set my line at a 1.5. I'm going to be looking at North Texas laying the 1. Did set my total 135.5, so you're at the 136. Also looking under 763, 764 on the betting board. North Dakota State. It's the road. They're facing off against Oral Roberts, and Oral Roberts finds themselves as 3.5-point favorites. Your total on this game is 147.5. I did set my line at a 5.5. I'm going to be one to lay with Oral Roberts. Oral Roberts has been playing a bit more slowly this season, but we've seen that tempo crank up. They're back to about 200th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and Oral Roberts has done a nice job with Isaac McBride being a good go-to scorer, being able to give the team 20.5 points per contest is for an Oral Roberts team that they need this scoring because the team has been rough on the glass, despite the fact that you've got Jalen Bedford along with Kareem Thompson being able to supply a combined about 13.5 rebounds per game between the two of them. They give you a little bit north of 27 points, and both shoot 40.3% from three-point range for Oral Roberts outside the top 3 with regards to rebound rate. Not as if this North Dakota State team has been able to do a magical job on the glass either, though. Bowden Skunberg is the only guy that gives you north of 5 rebounds per game, supplying the team with 15 points, 5.5 boards, shoots about 35.5% from three-point range. For North Dakota State, they only turn the ball over about 11 times per contest, but you thought this Oral Roberts defense was bad, and they are outside the top 3 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Well, this North Dakota State team, they're quite startling. North Dakota State, 342nd in all of college basketball in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Andrew Morgan is a lazy big man that, while he does give you 12.5 points and he's able to pop a few threes, he really just doesn't give you anything on the interior with North Dakota State. They are 341st in the country in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage, and with Oral Roberts shooting as a collective 38% from 3, having darn near everyone on the floor being able to pop threes, a team that's been able to do a nice job of facilitating. I do think that this is going to be a rough one for North Dakota State, and I certainly do think that you're going to get a lot of points in this ordeal. I recognize that North Dakota State is not playing at a super rate of speed, but they've given up 73 plus points in 4 out of their last 5 games, while they themselves have been able to get to the 74-point plateau in 3 of their last 4 games. Meanwhile, you've got an Oral Roberts team that's given up at least 76 points in each of their last 4 games. So, do you think the points are going to be plentiful here? Set my total at 153.5. I'm looking at the over, and with Oral Roberts, 1 to lay up to 5 with them. 765, 766 on the betting board. James Madison plays those to Georgia State. Georgia State is a underdog of 13 to 13.5 points. 152 to 152.5 is your total with James Madison. I did set them as a 14-point favorite. I'm going to be 1 to lay the 13 to 13.5. We're talking about this with Sean Paul. The fact that you've got this James Madison team just locking in on defense. They are a top 25 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. And for James Madison, even though the three-point shooting percentage, it has regrets. They're now more of a middle-of-the-road three-point shooting team. You still know that they've got the propensity to be able to shoot those threes. Terrence Edwards is able to give you 16.5 points. He's shooting in the mid-30s from three-point range after last year. He shot about 46% from 3. I do expect a little bit of positivity for him moving forward. They go up against a Georgia State team that has been able to do a relatively okay job in terms of being able to take care of the ball. They only turn the ball over about 10.5 times per contest. Juan Odom is a do-it-all player. He gives you about 11 to 12 points, 4 boards, 4 assists. So he's been able to do a nice job on that front, but for this Georgia State team, even though they do a nice job of guarding the arc. 24.6% from three-point range is what opponents shoot against them at home. That does climb to about 32.5% in road/shoot-to-corner environment, but all in all, they do a relatively good job of being able to guard the perimeter. This team can be had on the inside, and with TJ Bickerstaff being able to give you about 8 boards per contest, and Georgia State being a team that's well outside the top 150 with regards to rebound rate, they should be able to feast there. Georgia State, 249th in all of college basketball in terms of opponents' two-point shooting percentage, and James Madison, they're a top 100 team with regards to their interior defense. And as a matter of fact, for James Madison, they actually allow opponents to shoot worse from two-point range when they're away from home rather than when they are at home. So that does lead to some hairbraininess when they are at home. But James Madison, they've got so many guys that are able to handle the ball. You've got Noah Friedel, who's been able to do a nice job supplying the team with double figures. He's able to shoot about 38% from three-point range. Michael Green has been able to give you 3.5 assists per contest. You just have so many weapons for the James Madison team. And you've got a Georgia State team that, to their credit, they've been able to win each of the last 2 games. And the offense has been there for them. 71 plus points in each of the last 5 games. But for James Madison, they're absolutely locking in on defense. And the offense, it has still been consistent with at least 73 points in each of their last 5 games. That's with games against Appalachian St and Akron thrown in there. So I do think that James Madison is going to be able to take control of this game. And I do think that it's going to be a little bit more up-tempo, and it's going to be a little bit more of what we saw of James Madison towards the beginning part of the season. Semi-total 154, looking at the over, and I'm willing to lay up to 13.5. James Madison made them a 14-point favorite, 767, 768 on the betting board. UMKC is going to be playing up to South Dakota State. South Dakota State is a 1.5 to a 2-point favorite. Your total between 142 and 144. When it comes to UMKC, I did set them as a underdog of 4.5 points. So I'm going to be looking at South Dakota State. South Dakota State has been able to do a very nice job of being able to go bombs away from three-point range. Now, the problem that you always have for South Dakota State is the defense, and their defense is back outside the top 275 in terms of points allowed on a per-possession basis. But for this UMKC team, it's just been all over the place for them. They do have some very demonstrative home and road splits, so they have been much better when they've been in their friendly confines. As for UMKC, they're giving up about 15.5 points fewer per 100 possessions at home rather than in a road/neutral environment, but this team has been well outside the top 175 in terms of the opponent's three-point shooting percentage. They're actually a top 50 team in terms of their rebound rate. This despite the fact that you only have one guy in the roster that gives you north of 4.5 rebounds per game, and that's a guy with a lot of size, Jamar Brown. He's been a junior college transfer that's come in, given the team 14.5 points, 6 boards. He's really had to take hold of the offense. Alan David Abeka Jr. has been an afterthought after last year. He was so good down low. You've had Christian Coruscant be able to give you 4 assists per game, but it just feels like it's a random and strange UMKC team that doesn't have really a rhyme or reason everything that they do, and they've been all over the place with regards to their offensive production recently. Their last 5 games, they have scored 81, 85, 56, 78 in overtime, and 65 points. Meanwhile, you've got a South Dakota State team that has been a little bit better with their defense. In regulation, they've given up 72 points or fewer in 4 of their last 5 games, and you know that Zeke Mayo is going to be able to take over a game. Zeke Mayo has done an incredible job, giving you 18 points, 6 boards, 4 assists, shoots the high 30s from three-point range. Now with the South Dakota State team, they've really throttled down their tempo. They are looking to just execute. As for South Dakota State, 317th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and very interesting with South Dakota State. They play at a rate of about 6 possessions fewer when they leave home rather than when they are at home. You've got William Kyle who's able to give you about 6.5 rebounds per game, and then you've got Luke Capel, Charlie Easley, both giving you combined about 23 points, 10 boards, combined shoot about 39% from three-point range, but I do think that with UMKC, even though they are going to be able to win the battle in this one on the glass, UMKC is just not a team that I really trust to be able to do a good job of locking down from three-point range. They're about 162nd in the country with this regard, and with this being a top-heavy UMKC team and South Dakota State having kryptonite of giving up a lot of open threes and UMKC not being able to knock them down, I do think that South Dakota State goes on the road, gets the job done. I did set my total at 146.5. I do think that South Dakota State going to be able to knock down those threes. Needed to be able to get this total over, so looking at the over, I'm 1-8 with South Dakota State, 769, 770 on the betting board. Omaha is going to be playing us to South Dakota. South Dakota is an underdog of 8 points. 149.5 to 150 is your total line. With South Dakota, I did make them an underdog of 8 points, so I'm going to be willing to take the 8.5 with them. Omaha has been able to rise up quite a bit more with Frankie Fiddler being a nice go-to guy. 16 plus points, 5 plus boards, does a little bit of everything for the team. JJ White last year was giving you 4 plus assists per contest. We've seen a little bit of regression there, but for Omaha, they're looking to play nice, slow, and in control as well. They're outside the top 275 in terms of total possessions per game, but for this Omaha team, the big key for them, they absolutely have to lock it down from three-point range, because this South Dakota team, they can be a flamethrower at any time now. South Dakota, they themselves can be set on flames with regards to their three-point shooting defense as well. South Dakota, they are allowing opponents to shoot right around about 36% from three-point range, as outside the top 300 in all of college basketball, but for Omaha, this team is about 293rd in all of college basketball in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage, and that, in my opinion, it's going to be making it very tough for them to be able to cover this game. As for South Dakota, they're going to have the rebounding advantage in this game. Liat Thione has been able to give you about 9.8 boards, 13.5 points per game, and South Dakota is a halfway decent rebound rate team, while Nebraska Omaha is well outside the top 200 with that regard. Caleb Stewart has been able to give you 15.5 points. He shoots 41.5% from three-point range. Now, it is a South Dakota team that has more turnover, shall we say, woes than you do have on the flip side. As for South Dakota, they are turning the ball over about 13 times per contest. Meanwhile, you're only having about 10.5 to 11 turnovers per game for Nebraska Omaha, but it's because they utilize those turnovers to be able to get better looks from three-point range. And for the South Dakota team, while they are much more efficient with regards to their three-point shooting percentage when they are at home, this team still has been able to do a nice job shooting about 35.8% from three-point range. And as a matter of fact, I take that back. They're shooting 37% from three-point range when they're away from home as well. So they've done a nice job on that front, even with Paul Bruns having a little bit of a hot and cold season for them. I do think that with Nebraska Omaha, having Markel Sutton down low, giving you 6.5 rebounds per game is going to be solid. And for the South Dakota team, they are giving up quite a few points. They've given up at least 80 plus in 4 of their last 5 games. But in this Omaha defense, they've given up 72 plus in 4 of their last 5 as well. And I do think that South Dakota is going to be able to hold in this game. I did set my total at a 146. I do think that things slow down a little bit more. These are 2 lower tempo teams, and I do think that we do see both of these offenses in a little bit of a cooler here. So I'm going to be looking at the under, but but with South Dakota, won't take 8.5 to 9 with them. Set them as an 8-point dog. 771, 772 on the betting board. Tarleton St, it's a road face-off against UT Arlington. UT Arlington does find themselves as a 4 to a 4.5 point favorite, and your total on this game is 141 to 141.5, and I made Arlington a 4.5 point favorite, so I'm going to be willing to lay up to 4 with them. With UT Arlington, it's been a team that's really needed to just hone things in with regards to taking control and just being able to slow things down. They are in the bottom 50 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, and now they have to play against a Tarleton St team that is a top 35 team in the country with regards to turnovers forced on a per possession basis. But if you're able to break that initial wave from Tarleton St, there is open shots to be had. Tarleton St is a team as well outside the top 200 in terms of rebound rate, and Tarleton St, in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage, they're like a lot of those teams that they gamble for turnovers, and much like a lot of these teams that gamble for turnovers, if they don't come up with it, they give up a lot of open shots from three. They are 251st in all of college basketball in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage, and when it comes to UT Arlington, they certainly do give it up from distance as well, 275th in the country, but for Arlington, opponents shoot just 31.4% from three-point range against them at home. That goes to about 37.5% in a road or neutral court environment, and they go up against the Tarleton St team as a bottom 50 three-point shooting team in all of college basketball when away from home. They shoot about 32.8% from three-point range overall, and they've been able to get quite a bit more out of Ja'Cory Smith and skip to my Lou Williams. These two guys are combining for about 29.5 points per game. They're both shooting in the mid-30s from three-point range, so they've been able to get a lot of support there. And for Tarleton St, unlike a lot of those teams that they do go out there, they gamble for a lot of turnovers, they honestly don't do the world's worst job of being able to take care of the ball, as they turn the ball over about 12 times per contest. Not saying that's amazing or anything like that, but it's not too terrible. That said, I still do think that this team is going to have a little bit of a tough time being able to find open looks from three-point range, going up against a squad in UT Arlington that they do a much better job with that regard, and you've got Philip Russell now in the full for Arlington as well. The turnovers have still been bad even with them in there, but they've been able to hone it in there a little bit more. They've been a bit more efficient with that regard, and he's been able to get the team about 14 to 15 points per game. Was one of those two-time transfers that was out of the fold for much of non-conference play. And then you've got Jamar Wilson, Lontawan Gordon, who have been able to combine for about 17 rebounds per game. Tarleton St, they just really don't have anyone that's able to compare down low, as you've been able to have this Tarleton St team be able to give you a little bit on the glass at about 248th with regards to rebound rate. Arlington, though, they're more around 100th in the country, as for Tarleton St, they've only got one guy that really gives you north of 6.5 rebounds per game. That would be Keandre Gaddy. They've also been able to get about 6.5 boards out of Emmanuel Incionte. He comes in from Italy, so these guys have been able to help things out a little bit. But for this Tarleton St team, it's been all over the place, and it's been random for them. They're riding a nice 5-game win streak, but a lot of these games have been very much nip and tuck games. They have had 2 out of their last 4 games be decided by 5 points or fewer. Meanwhile, you've got an Arlington team that all of a sudden has allowed 68 points or fewer in each of their last 5 games. So I do think that this game might be a little bit more under control than we're used to seeing for Arlington, as Arlington is a top 50 team with regards to total possessions per game, but we're noticing that Tarleton St cranking things up with their offense as well, at least 75 points in 4 of their last 5 games. I set my total in the middle here. I think that this is going to be close enough for late game filling, so did make my total 144.5 with just the sheer amount of possessions I expect in this game, looking at the over of Arlington, willing to lay up to 4 with them. 773, 774 on the betting board. Louisiana Monroe is going to be on the road facing off against Southern Miss, and Southern Miss is a 8.5 to a 9-point favorite. Your total is between 140 and 140.5. With Southern Miss, I can only set them as a 7.5-point favorite. I'm going to be taking the points with Monroe. Louisiana Monroe has actually been playing some much better basketball recently. If you look at the full season numbers, I mean, it's awful for them. Louisiana Monroe has actually been a top 125 team in terms of rebound rate, but they're outside the top 275 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. It's just been a big, giant nightmare for them as well. They only shoot about 65.5% of the free throw line, 30% from three-point range, but I don't know if they just ate their Wheaties or something like that, but all of a sudden, this Louisiana Monroe offense has went from being dormant to being lively, as they have gotten to at least 70 points in each of their last 7 games. Nika, a guy that I can't pronounce his last name on, it's got like 15 letters, so he's going to be known as Nika for the sake of this podcast. 12 points, 6 boards. Guy from Georgia has been able to do a nice job. Tariq LaCour has been able to give you about 10.5 points per contest as well, and then you've been able to get a little bit more down low as well. Savion Gallen is the guy that really helps you out from the outside, shooting about 40% from 3-point. He has supplied double figures in 3 of the team's last 4 games, and then when it comes to a rebounding sort of perspective, Jalen Bolden, he's able to give you about 6 boards per contest, has really been able to be a nice gadget player. I know that he was dealing with a little bit of an injury in their game against Coastal Carolina, only played 5 minutes there, but now he's been able to return back into the fold for the team. Meanwhile, for Southern Miss, they've been dealing with the injury to Andre Curbelo for quite quite some time, but they still do have some capable guards out there in the backcourt. Donovan Ivory, along with Austin Crawley, have been able to combine for 29 points per contest, and since Campbell has been out of the fold, this defense has been a whole heck of a lot better. They've given up 73 points or fewer in each of their last 3 games. It has been an inconsistent Southern Miss team, to say the least. They are still outside the top 200 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They're outside the top 250 in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, and though this Louisiana Monroe team has been significantly better with regards to their offense, still not a team that you really trust to be able to go bombs away from 3-point range or anything like that, and that is the biggest kryptonite with this team, because when they have Victor Hart out there and he's been dealing with a little bit of an injury, he's able to give you about a block per contest, and then you've been able to have some relatively good low post play out of Victor Iwakar. The UNLV transfer has been able to give you about 2 blocks per contest as well, so I do think that this is going to be a game where we do see this Louisiana Monroe team probably slow down just a little bit, but I do still feel like this total is set a little bit too low. Southern Miss has been a team that has really been giving it up all season long, and for Louisiana Monroe, even though the offense has been a whole lot better, they've also given up 75 plus points in each of their last 5 games as well. So I do think that things are going to be more in control, where both teams are starting to approach 70 points. One probably gets past it, one probably comes up a little bit short. So I did set my total at a 143.5. I'm going to be looking at the over, and with Southern Miss going to play some as a 7.5 point favorite, take the points with this hot Monroe team, and I'm going to be taking a look at this total under 775, 776 on the betting board. Troy is going to be playing against Arkansas State. Arkansas State is a underdog of 6 points. 156 or 156.5 is your total. Arkansas State is one of the more interesting teams in all of college basketball. They average north of 21 points more per 100 possessions on offense at home rather than in a roadside-shoot-record environment. Meanwhile, if you take a look at the defense, Arkansas State is actually giving up about 7.5 points fewer per 100 possessions in a roadside-shoot-record environment rather than at home. So as a result, I'm probably a little bit low on this total. I did set my total at a 154. I'm going to be taking a look at the under. And with Troy, I did make them a 6-point favorite. I was seeing a few 5.5s out there a little bit earlier, and if we could get back to a 5.5, I am going to be willing to lay the number. When it comes to Troy, this team has been just an absolute machine in terms of covering, and I do think that it might be drying up a little bit sooner rather than later, but for Troy, this team has been absolutely tremendous with the way that they've been able to operate. They don't have a single guy that gives you north of 5.5 rebounds per game, yet they're going to have the advantage down low, even though DeAndre Dominguez for Arkansas State is able to give you about 13 points, 6 boards. He's just really the only guy that does a good job of being able to hit the glass for Arkansas State. They're about 132nd in all of college basketball with regards to rebound rate. Meanwhile, for Troy, they're 52nd, with the whole being greater than the sum of its parts, as really other than Thomas Dowd, who's able to give you 5.5 rebounds per game, not a lot of guys do an amazing job of being able to hit the glass individually, but as a collective, they've been able to do a nice job on that front. You've been able to have Miles Rigsby along Christian Eugene combined for about 27 points, both shoot north of 40% from 3-point range. Troy does turn the ball for 13.5 times per contest, but in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, they're a top 30 team in college basketball, and this is an Arkansas State team that they can get a little bit loose with it with about 12 turnovers per contest and get a little bit more loose with it when they're away from home rather than when they are at home, as Taryn Todd has been able to give you about 12 points per contest. Caleb Fields more around 12.9 points per game, and if you are going to be able to knock off this Troy team, you have to do it from the outside. Troy outside the top 300 with regards to their 3-point shooting defense. Meanwhile, if you take a look at Arkansas State, getting back to my point about them having their turnovers, in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, they're about 126th in all of college basketball, but that does go outside the top 150 when they're in a roadside-shoot-record environment, so they do have a few woes there, and while Troy has been really giving it up from 3-point range, so is Arkansas State. Arkansas State is 252nd in the country with regards to opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, having so many guys like an Amir Mohammed, who's able to give you about 11 points per contest. This Troy team is about 8 to 9 deep. I do think that they're going to be able to pull this one off against a Arkansas State team that has been very, very harebrained in terms of the way that they have been playing. For Arkansas State, they have given up 77 plus points in 4 of their last 5 games, with the lone exception giving up 71. Meanwhile, for this Troy team, they've given up 68 or fewer in 3 of the last 4 games. So it's a good old situation of something's got to give. I did set Troy as a 6-point favorite. If we could get to back to 5.5, I'm going to be willing to lay the number in. Did set my total 154 with the way that Arkansas State plays away from home. So looking at the under, and at 5.5 or less, willing to lay with Troy. 777, 778 on the betting board. Purdue is going to be playing us in Minnesota. A state with the smallest strengths in the union. Minnesota is finding themselves as a 16 to a 17-point underdog, and your total on this game is anywhere between 145.5 and 146. Now, the big question for Minnesota is Dawson Garcia going to be playing in this game? There's still a lot of question mark as I am recording this podcast. It is still very, very questionable. We do not know if he is going to be able to go or not. My guess is he probably plays, but he is going to be far less than 100%. So I've sort of given 50% credit here for Minnesota. If he doesn't go, it's not like I would make a dramatic move because I've already thought that Dawson Garcia is not going to be 100%. So I do want to make that very clear, and I'm going to be willing to take the points here here with Minnesota. I set this line at a 15.5. When it comes to this Minnesota squad, they do have the leader among power conference players in Elijah Hawkins in terms of assists. He's been able to give out 7.6 assists per contest and has been much more efficient than he was at Howard a season ago. Last year, he led qualifying D1 players with about 4 turnovers per contest. That's down to about 2.7 this season, and even if Dawson Garcia does not play, that's going to be rough, but they've already played. Minnesota has 3 games without him, and they've honestly been okay without him. You've got Pharrell Payne, who's able to give you 9.5 points, 6 boards. Now, they are going to have their issues with Giant of the Year, Zach Edey. They were going to lose that rebound battle regardless, but Zach Edey just absolutely destroying teams, 23.5 points, 11.5 rebounds per game. But for Purdue, while they do an amazing job on defense, this has been a top 5 team in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, and a big reason why Lance Jones, Brayden Smith in the backcourt, both giving you between about 12.5 to 13 points per contest. Smith is now shooting 42.5% from three-point range for Minnesota. They absolutely need to guard the arc, with Zach Edey now being a 50% three-point shooter, which, obviously that's a little bit of a fuddy-duddy number. We're going to call it what it is, but among their top 8 players that have made at least 1 3, 7 of them are shooting at least 40% from 3. It's just absolutely ridiculous. And this is a Minnesota team that they aren't the same defense when they're away from home. They are giving up north of 15 points more per 100 possessions in a road/shoot court environment rather than at home. And they're about 192nd in the country in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. Far from amazing, far from terrible. Meanwhile, Purdue has been 43rd in this regard. Purdue is certainly going to be able to do a good job of being able to guard things inside. But like I said, I think that we're going to be able to get a little bit of Garcia in this game. I don't think he's going to be at 100%, but I do think that with Minnesota having the ancillary pieces, being able to step up, I do think that they do just enough to hold in this game. I feel like we've gotten just a little bit overinflated. I set my line at 15.5. I'm going to be willing to take 16 plus, and I did set my total at 147.5. This Purdue team has been incredibly efficient on offense. They're playing much more up-tempo. They've gotten to at least 75 points in 4 of their last 5 games, and this Minnesota team bleeds points on the road. So, looking at the over, and I'm going to be willing to take the points with Minnesota. 779, 780 on the betting board. Southern Utah plays us to Seattle. Seattle, a 3.5 to a 4-point favorite. And your total, it is 147.5. With Seattle, I did set them as a 5.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay this number. Southern Utah has actually been able to cover north of 2/3 of their games this season. It's not quite Minnesota level good, but its team has been pretty darn good. This despite the fact that Southern Utah is 346th in the country in terms of 3-point shooting percentage, and this has been one of the least efficient offenses in all of college basketball. The way that Southern Utah has been covering, they do an amazing job of guarding the arc. They allow opponents to shoot just 31.7% from 3, but buyer beware on Southern Utah. They allow opponents to shoot 34.3% from 3-point range at home. That actually drops to 30.1% on the road. So the fact that this game is at home actually doesn't help them out too much. And look at the overall defense of the Southern Utah team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They're overall clocking in 250th in the country, and they're giving up only about 5 points more per 100 possessions when they're away from home. So they don't get some sort of massive upgrade when they are at home by any stretch of the imagination. Meanwhile, you've got yourself a bunch in Seattle that has been able to have still that primary scorer in Cam Tyson being so consistent. He's supplied the team with about 17 points per contest. Throws in there a few assists from 3-point range. He is firing it in there at about a 37.5% clip, but you've got Alex Shoemaker along with Jason Christophilius, who have been able to combine for about 27.5 points per game. And then you got Kobe Williamson, Brandon Chatfield, both being able to give you about 6 boards. Seattle's a top 75 team with regards to the rebound rate. Meanwhile, the Southern Utah team, other than what you've been able to get down low out of the gentleman that comes in and Prasad Falah, who's been able to give you about 6 rebounds per game, this is not a team that really does a great job on the glass, and they're going to be completely outgunned with that regard. Now, they've been able to get a little bit of a boost with being able to get in there the 2-time transfer Jamari Sibley, who's been able to give you about 4 or so rebounds per game, but hasn't been too much to be able to make too much of an impact for this team. Southern Utah about 305th with regards to rebound rate, and for Southern Utah, I feel like it's just been a matter of circumstance that they've been able to cash so many tickets for you. I do think that they get exposed by a Seattle team that's in the top 50 with regards to points allowed on a per possession basis. That's Seattle as a 5.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay this number, and in terms of my total, I did set this at a 143.5, so I'm going to be diving under to go along with Seattle. 781, 782 on the betting board. Western Illinois is the road face-off against Tennessee Tech, and Tennessee Tech does find themselves as a home underdog of 3 points. Your total is between 126.5 and 127. I did make my total a little bit higher in this one. I'm going to be taking a look at the over. I set my total at 129. With Tennessee Tech, they've been able to get the ball rolling a little bit more. I do like Javius Harvey. He shoots in the mid-30s from 3-point range, gives you about 13 points per game, and for Western Illinois, they don't really do their part on offense. They're well outside the top 250 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, but it's been really interesting to watch Drew Cisse just completely control things down low. He's a top 5 player in the country in terms of rebounds per game with about 11.6 for Western Illinois. They're 28th in the country as well in terms of opponent's three-point shooting percentage, and it does go to about 29.6% when they're in a roadside shoot corner environment. They actually allow opponents to shoot better from three-point range when they're at home. Meanwhile, this is a Tennessee Tech team that they do have their issues in terms of being able to just guard in general. They're outside the top 300 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, who are 50th in the country in terms of opponent's three-point shooting percentage. And while Western Illinois does not have a better of different scoring options, you do have Ryan Myers, a transfer that comes in from Iona, giving you about 13 points, shooting 43.5% from three-point range. James Dent Jr. has been able to supply the team with about 12.5 points per contest as well. Love what he's been able to bring to the table. And then for Tennessee Tech, along with Harvey, you've been able to get a little bit more out of Daniel Egbanwi. Hopefully I said that correctly. He's been able to give you about 6 boards block per contest. For a team that they shoot about 32.5% from 3, they don't get out of sorts with about 11.7 turnovers per game. And for Western Illinois, even though the defense has been very good for this team, and for Western Illinois, they've actually given up 64 points or fewer in 4 of their last 5 games. They're not a team that's going to look to rip the ball away, generate a whole bunch of turnovers. They're looking to play good, tough man-to-man defense. Western Illinois, 94th in all of college basketball in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and though they have struggled on offense, I do think that they're going to be able to find their footing. Again, it's a Tennessee Tech team that, once again, 279th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. So this is a circumstance where I'm going to be taking a look at the over. I set my total 129. I do think that this game is going to be stunk enough for late game filling it with Western Illinois. I trust in their defense here. Made them a 5-point favorite, so laying it with Western Illinois and looking at this total under as well. 783, 784 on the betting board. Lindenwood, it's a road face-off against SIU Edwardsville, and Edwardsville does find themselves as 9.5 to 10-point favorites. Their total is 131.5. With Edwardsville, I did make them a favorite of 10.5 points. You're at the 9.5 to 10. I'm going to be willing to lay it for Edwardsville. If you look at them out of conference, they were one of the more ghastly defenses they were going to find in all of college basketball, but they've really been able to bump things up quite a bit ever since conference play has began. And you still have DeMarco Minor being very major down low. He's only 6 feet tall, but he gives you 8 boards, 14 points. I absolutely love the way that he's roaming the floor. Now, you've got the Wright brothers and Shamar and Lamar Wright. Lamar has been dipping a little bit in terms of his offensive production down to about 32% three-point shooting, but still able to supply you with about 9.5 points per contest. Meanwhile, Shamar Wright, how about him? Being able to give you about 15 points, shoots in the high 30s from three-point range. Love what he's able to do against a Lindenwood team that's outside the top 250 with regards to their rebound rate. They're outside the top 225 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. So defense has been a little bit better for them recently. A little bit of a matter of circumstance there, but they've allowed fewer than 70 points in 3 out of their last 4 games. So it's been looking a little bit better on that front, but you don't have a facilitator for the team. Darius Bean is right now leading the way with 2.2 assists per contest. Keenan Cole's been able to give you about 6.5 boards, 19 points per game, but the team shoots 27% from three-point range. That is a bottom 15 mark in all of college basketball. And if you do want to be able to attack this SIU Edwardsville defense, you do want to be doing it from the outside because they are going to give you some open looks. SIU Edwardsville, in terms of opponent's three-point shooting percentage, 325th in all of college basketball. Them not being able to exploit that with this Lindenwood team being a team that's not able to hit the glass. They don't have a primary facilitator. I just don't think that they're going to be able to hold up in this spot, especially with SIU Edwardsville really starting to be able to lock it down in terms of their defense. They've hit a little bit of sag recently with their last 3 games, having given up north of 75 points. I do think that they are able to reverse that, and they're really able to hold down a Lindenwood team that's been scuffling recently. So I did set Lindenwood as an underdog of 10.5 points. I'm willing to lay the 10 with Edwardsville. Set my total at a 130.5. So also looking under 785, 786 on the betting board. UT Martin plays us to Southern Indiana. Southern Indiana is a underdog of 7.5 to 8 points. Totals between 153.5 and 154 with Southern Indiana. I did set them as an underdog of 11 points. I'm going to be willing to lay with UT Martin. It's been a little bit of a scuffle recently for UT Martin. They have that loss against Little Rock a few nights ago, but for this UT Martin team, they've actually been able to do a little bit better in terms of their defense. Not calling them amazing, but they've given up fewer than 70 points in 3 out of their last 5 games, and they go up against the Southern Indiana team that credit where credit is due. After they lost so many pieces in the offseason, it was an offense that was very slow to get going. They've now been able to get past the 70-point plateau in 6 out of their last 7 games. I do feel like it might be built on a little bit of sand, though. This team is still turning the ball over 14 times per contest. They're shooting about 33.5% from three-point range, as their main three-point shooter has been Jack Schmoke. He's been able to shoot about 45% from three-point range. This is a UT Martin team that you could score points on because UT Martin is one of the teams in all of college basketball that is looking to just absolutely gut it. 19th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Southern Indiana, they're fast, but they're not warp speed fast. They're about 129th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. And for Southern Indiana, it's been all about what you've been able to get out of a pair of guys in A.J. Smith along Jeremiah Hernandez. They've been able to combine for about 26.5 points per contest. You've got about a combined 3 assists. These two guys, as it's been Mr. Champion, Jack Champion, who's been able to give you about 4 assists per contest. But for UT Martin, I do think that they're going to be able to dominate this game down low. Jacob Cruz, Isa Muhammad have been able to combine for about 16.5 boards per contest. Cruz is able to give you 17 points. He shoots 40% from 3. You've got Jordan Sears, who's been able to shoot north of 45% from 3-point range, give you 4.4 assists per game. And for this UT Martin team, about 12 turnovers per game, considering how fast they play. That's actually a really good rate going up against the Southern Indiana team that when they're at home, they're a really good 3-point shooting defense. They allow you to shoot only about 30% from 3. In a road/shoot-your-corner environment, it really goes down the toilet bowl at 37%. I do think that UT Martin on their home floor is going to be able to take control of this game. I did set my line at 11, so I'm going to be willing to lay the number, and did set my total 155 with the way that Southern Indiana has bumped up their offense. Looking at the over, and I'm willing to lay with UT Martin. 787, 788 on the betting board. Eastern Illinois plays those to Southeast Missouri State. SEMO is a 5.5-point underdog. Your total's between 133.5 and 134, and with Southeast Missouri State, I did set them as an underdog of 6.5 points. I'm going to be willing to lay it with Eastern Illinois. Eastern Illinois, a top 125 team in the country in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. Now, where Eastern Illinois does really go wrong is that they give it up from 3 points. 310th of the country with regards to opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, but they face off against the Southeast Missouri State team that they can't shoot it from inside the arc. They can't shoot it from outside the arc. It's been rough. The one thing Southeast Missouri State has been able to do, they're an okay perimeter defense. They're about 101st in the country in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, but this is not some sort of a beastly team in Eastern Illinois from distance themselves. They do have someone that 2 years ago was actually your top 3-point shooter in all of college basketball, Dan Lewis, when he shot north of 50% from distance. Those days are very, very long gone, though, as for Eastern Illinois, they don't have a single guy in the roster that averages north of 2.6 points per game that shoots north of 33.5% from 3. So they've had to look to efficiency, they've had to look to steals, and just be able to take care of the ball. They only turned the ball over 10 times per contest with Tiger Booker leading the way. 3 assists, 2.2 steals, 15.5 points per game. You've got Cooper Jacoby, who's been able to give you 7.5 rebounds per game. Now, he has been dealing with quite a few ailments and is most likely going to be out of the fold once again in this one, but for Southeast Missouri State, you just don't have anyone that's able to lock things down low for the team as well. Josh Early with his 4.7 rebounds per game. He's the only guy that's going to be active for this game that's currently giving the team north of 3.6 rebounds per game. They've had Dylan Branson be in and out of the fold after last year he helped the team make the NCAA tournament with 7 points per contest. He came back briefly, but now he's back out with an injury. Rob Martin has been able to shoot 38% from 3 with 11.5 points per contest, but Southeast Missouri State, they're outside the top 275 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They're well outside the top 3 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. And for Southeast Missouri State, they have failed to get past the 62-point plateau in 3 of their last 5 games, going up against an Eastern Illinois team that they've been pretty solid with their defense. 71 points of fear surrendered in 4 of their last 5 games. I do think that Eastern Illinois takes hold of this game. I do think that the Eastern Illinois Panthers are going to be able to turn defense into offense as well. And Southeast Missouri State, still a relatively mid-tempo team. I do think that they're going to be able to find a few points in this one. So I did sell my total 134.5 when at the over. Now to Eastern Illinois, made them a 6.5-point favorite, so going to be willing to lay the 5.5 here. 789, 790 on the betting board. It is Loyola Marymount, and they're going to be playing against Gonzaga. Gonzaga is a favorite of 13 points. Totals between 150.5 and 151 with Gonzaga. I did make them a favorite of 11 points. I'm going to be willing to take the 13 with Loyola Marymount. Now for Loyola Marymount, things have been sliding away for the team a little bit ever since Justice Hill has been out of the fold. He was a very good point guard over at LSU and Murray State in recent seasons. Him being out of the fold, that has been causing for a little bit of dismay when it comes to Loyola Marymount, but I do think that Loyola Marymount is going to be able to slow down this game and be able to have better results than the last time they played against Gonzaga, because this Loyola Marymount team, they have had their issues to say the least when they played against Gonzaga. They went on the road, they got pounded by a kind of 92-58 earlier in the season. That was a game where Gonzaga was able to shoot 59% from the floor, and Loyola Marymount lost the turnover battle by a count of 20-5. I do think that they're going to be able to do a little bit of a better job against a Gonzaga team that is actually much improved on defense. Gonzaga is now a top 45 team in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and It's really been their twin towers in Graham Ike and Tawan Watson who have been really able to take control of the offense. A little bit north of 30 points, both combined for about 14.7 rebounds per contest, and Watson is able to shoot 46% from three-point range. Now, as a team, Gonzaga is only shooting about 33.5% from distance, but the offense has really been able to get it going after they had a little bit of a rough stretch to begin the season. They did have that doldrum game against St. Mary's, but 82-plus points in 4 of the last 5 games. Meanwhile, you've got a Loyola Marymount team that you just need a little bit more, in my opinion, out of Kelly Le'u-Pepe. 10 points, 5 boards per contest. You were expecting a little bit more after last season. He shot about 43.5% for distance, but it feels like we're starting to get that out of him. He scored double figures in each of the last 4 games, 5+ boards in each of the last 5 games, so he's been able to come to the forefront, and he's looking a little bit more like the Le'u-Pepe that we saw from a season ago. You've also got the former Gonzaga gentleman in Dominic Harris, who's been able to shoot about 43.5% from 3 for a Loyola Marymount team that they still only turn the ball over about 11.5 times per contest. It's gone northward ever since the injury to Justice Hill, but you still have guys that are capable in the backcourt like Justin Wright, who he comes in from NC Central. He wasn't a primary ball handler, but he's able to handle the ball. He's able to give you about 11 points per contest. He should be able to help out. You've been seeing a lot more out of Will Johnson as well, the UT Rio Grande Valley transfer, who's been able to supply the team with 36% three-point shooting, a little bit under 3 assists per contest, like what he's been able to do. And this is a Gonzaga bunch that you do have to wonder if they're going to be in for a little bit of a letdown spot after having that big win against Kentucky. And keep in mind, prior to that game, we had seen Gonzaga trailing on the road against Pacific just about 2 weeks earlier. So, I mean, it has been a Gonzaga team that has been all over the place. Ryan Nembhard has been looking much better for this Gonzaga team recently, but has not been quite the same scorer that he was while he was over at Creighton and has been shooting less than 33% from three-point range. So, a circumstance where I did set my line at 11. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Loyola Marymount, and I did set my total at 153 with this Gonzaga team. I really do think that this offense is starting to get into a little bit more mock turbo. They've been playing a little bit more up-tempo, so looking at the over, and I'm going to be willing to take the points with old Loyola Marymount. 791, 792 on the betting board. Long Beach State, it's the road they're facing off against UC Davis, and UC Davis is a favorite of 3 points. Total on this game is 151.5, and I did say UC Davis is a favorite of 4 points. Here at the 3, I'm going to be willing to lay this number with UC Davis. They have the best player out there on the floor, and that'd be Elijah Pepper. He's able to give you 21 points. He peppers in there north of 5.5 rebounds per game. Now, the question always becomes with them, is there going to be enough around them to be able to support them? And the answer is yes, with Ty Johnson being able to give you about 16 points per contest. You've been able to have quite a few guys just do a little bit of this and that on the boards, as UC Davis is actually a top 125 team in all of college basketball with regards to rebound rate. And for UC Davis, even though they've got a lot of nameless, faceless guys outside of Pepper and Johnson, they've done a nice job of being able to lock it down on defense. UC Davis is a top 80 team with regards to points allowed on a per possession basis. As a matter of fact, they've climbed to 57th. Meanwhile, Long Beach State, they're a harebrained up-tempo team. They're in the top 50 in terms of total possessions per game. They're not awful with their defense, though. They're about 165th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They only give up about 2.4 points more per 100 possessions when they leave home. But for Long Beach State, they just don't have the three-point shooting needed to be able to get this done. They are shooting only about 31.3% from three-point range. That is well outside the top 250 in all of college basketball, going up against a UC Davis team that they do have a little bit of kryptonite, giving it up from the outside. They're more on 125th with regards to their opponent's three-point shooting percentage. So I will say, Traore Square going to be able to keep Long Beach State lively in this game. Lucina Traore, more of a low-post player, 11.5 points, 9.5 rebounds per game, while Abakar Traore, 12 points, 8 boards, 4 assists. Absolutely love both of their games. But for Long Beach State, you just need Marcus Siones to be a little bit more consistent. He only shoots about 28% from three-point range. Does give you about 17.5 points, 3 assists per contest. But that said, Issa Silva, who came in from the Pac-12, averaging 3.5 points per contest, he has been pretty much a turd for this team. That has not been too terrific. And for UC Davis, this team has still been able to lock down on their defense. They did give up 87 in their last game against Hawaii. Prior to that, had given up fewer than 70 points each of their previous 3 games. You've got a Long Beach State team that they have certainly been able to crank it up with regards to their offense, 76 plus points in each of their last 3 games, but they've been a very up and down team as well, with the three-point shooting having a lot of inconsistency, and with the way that UC Davis has been able to control things on defense. UC Davis, not a team that's going to get a bunch of turnovers, but they do a good job of just locking you down in general. I do think that UC Davis finds a way to get it done with the best player on the floor in Pepper. So I did set my total at 152. I do think that this is going to be snug enough for late game following, and I do think that Long Beach State is going to be giving it up to Pepper and company. I'm going to be looking at the over with UC Davis willing to lay up to 3.5 with them. 783, 784 on the betting board. Weber State is on the road facing off against Idaho. Idaho is a home underdog of 6.5 points. Your total is between 138.5 and 139. Did set my number at a 141.5. I'm looking at the over. Weber State has been beginning to really give up some points during the non-conference portion of the season. They were more in the top 100 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. This has ascended quite a bit. They're now 133rd in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. But you do have an Idaho team that, even though they do have some nice home and road splits, they're much better when they're at home. They're still 320th in the country country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and they're still going up against a Weber State team that is one of the more dominant forces in mid-major basketball. And his name is Jalen Jones. 20 points, 9.7 boards, 5 assists per contest. He just does it all. And then he's got a lot of good outside shooters helping him out, as you've got Steve Plankin shooting 38.5% from 3. He supplies you with about 12 points per game. Louis Jordan has been able to shoot about 40% from 3-point. He's been a little bit in and out of the fold. It's going to be interesting to see if he goes in this game or not, but when he's been in, he's been able to give you a little bit of a threat, like Blaze Threat, who's been able to give you 10.5 points per contest. He shoots overall about 34% from 3-point, throws in there about 2.5 assists per game. He's been coming on towards the back half of the season, going up against an Idaho team that it's been a offense that has really needed to be at home, because overall this team is shooting about 34% from 3, and the raw points has not necessarily been prolific with Idaho, because Idaho is a little bit more of a low-tempo team. They're well outside the top 225 in terms of total possessions per game, and for that matter, Weber State is as well. But for Idaho, in terms of points scored on a per-possession basis, they're about 228th in all of college basketball. You've been able to have Julius Mims be able to give you about 7.5 boards, 11.5 points per game, while Quinn Tinker has been able to give you about 3.5 assists per game as well. But for Weber State, they do come in just on an absolute tear with regards to their offense, 72+ points in 3 out of their last 4 games. Meanwhile, for Idaho, it has been up and down in terms of the defense, to say the least, giving up at least 73 points in 4 of their last 5 games. Idaho is well outside the top 225 with regards to the rebound rate. Weber State, I think that they should be able to control things here with a lot of the ancillary pieces, doing a nice job, just being able to hit the boards, being able to be very consistent. Weber State about 217th in the country with regards to the rebound rate, and I do think that with Weber State being able to take care of the ball, only turn the ball over about 10.5 times per contest, going up against an Idaho team that sometimes they just get a little bit out of sorts with regards to their shot selection. I do think that Weber State, with having the best player out there on the floor in Dylan Jones, is able to get it done. I did set Weber State as a 9.5 point road favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number, and did set my total 141.5. I'm going to be looking at the over with an Idaho defense that's been very much less than consistent. So going to be willing to lay the number, and going to be taking a look at this total over as well. 785, 786 on the betting board. Idaho State, they're facing off against Eastern Washington, and Eastern Washington does find themselves as a 9.5 to a 10 point favorite, and your total on this game is between 143 and 143.5. And with Idaho State, I did set them as an underdog of 10 points. I'm going to be willing to lay it with Eastern Washington. Eastern Washington is averaging about 18.5 points more per 100 possessions at home rather than when they're in a road/shoot-to-corner environment. And for the Eastern Washington team, they're just absolutely pulverizing teams from 3-point range. They're shooting 37.3% from the outside. At home, this climbs to north of 39% from the outside, going against an Idaho State team that they proved correct the theory. Just because you play slowly doesn't mean that you play amazing on defense, as for Idaho State, they're allowing opponents to shoot about 35.5% from 3-point range. That's 283rd in the country. They're well outside the top 225 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Now, I do like the game of Braden Parker along with Kyrie Huey. They've been able to combine for about 12 boards per contest, and Parker is able to give you 14.5 points per game. But Eastern Washington just has a lot of guys with size with good stretchability. Dane Erickstrup, he stands right around 6'10", 11 points, shoots 36% from 3-point. Cedric Howard, he shoots 40% from 3, 14.5 points per contest. And this is an Eastern Washington team that's completely different as well with regards to their defense when they're at home as well, because Eastern Washington, they've been getting gashed from 3-point range. They're well outside the top 200 with regards to opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, but they give up about 5 points fewer per 100 possessions when they're at home rather than in a road/shoot-to-corner environment. This is an Idaho State team that just doesn't have a lot in terms of being consistent with regards to that outside shooting, though you do have Malik Arrington, who's been able to give you about 4.5 assists per contest, doesn't turn the ball over time. And for Idaho State, to their credit, they're about 152nd in the country with regards to rebound rate. This is the Eastern Washington team, though. They're in the top 100 with that regard. Eastern Washington has gotten to at least 78 points in each of their last 3 games. They're really piling it up, and the defense has come along for the ride as well, giving up 70 points of fear in 3 of their last 5 games, going up against an Idaho State team that they do a nice job of being able to slow down games. They have scored 68 points of fear in regulation in 3 of their last 4 games. They've been able to win all but one of those games, as the game that they lost went to double overtime. But I do think that Eastern Washington, just a little bit of a different animal, and that travel is going to take quite a bit out of them. I did set my line at 10. I'm going to be willing to lay with Eastern Washington. I did make my total 146. I'm looking at the over, and I'm going to be willing to lay up to 9.5 with Eastern Washington. 797, 798 on the betting board. It is Northern Arizona on the road facing off against Sacramento State, and Sacramento State is a 3-point favorite. Your total is 132. I did set Sacramento State as a 3-point favorite. I am seeing out there a stray 2.5, and at the 2.5, I'd be willing to lay it with Sacramento State. Sacramento State is the top 75 team in terms of rebound rate. Now, they've had a tough time holding on to the ball. They are well outside the top 275 in terms of turnovers per possession, as Duncan Boom Boom Powell, who comes in from North Carolina A&T, he's had to become a do-it-all player. 12 points, 7 boards, 2 assists, shoots about 30% from 3 as a 6'8", sort of a joker player, as I like to call it. Z Harmoda has come in from Utah State. He's been able to give you about 12 points per contest, as for Sacramento State, they do do shoot just 31% from three. And if you do want to hurt the Sacramento State team, you want to be doing it from the outside, because Sacramento State, even though they've got a good rebound rate, they are well outside the top 225 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, because they do allow you to shoot 35.6% from three. Overall, that expands to 36.8% at home. That is a bottom 100 mark in all of college basketball. And for Northern Arizona, they've actually been halfway decent at being able to guard the arc, 129th in the country in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage, but they were anticipating having Carson Tout being able to do a good job locking it down low, because he was able to give the team 8+ rebounds per game, and he has not played this far this season, so that's been an issue. You've had Trent McLaughlin be able to supply 16.5 points, shooting 35% from three-point range, but it has been rough sledding for this Northern Arizona team, as other than Carson Basham, the transfer from the West Coast Conference, giving you about 6 boards and a block and a half per contest, you just don't have anything down low for Northern Arizona. As a result, this defense has really been suffering, because even though they do a nice job around the perimeter in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, they're 291st, because they just get gashed night in, night out down low, and I do think that is going to be popping up once again in this affair with Sacramento State. I did set them as a 3-point favorite, still have my trepidations with regards to this offense and them being able to take care of the ball, but Northern Arizona, they don't generate a lot of turnovers, so as a result, I do think that there's going to be a lot of clean possessions and late game fouling. So my total 135, looking at the over of Sacramento State, I'm going to be willing to lay up to 2.5 with them. 799, 800 on the betting board. It is Denver, and they play us to North Dakota. North Dakota does find themselves as an underdog of 3.5 points. Total on this game is 158 to 158.5. I did set my total at a 155. I'm going to be looking at the under. Now, Denver has been a machine in terms of their offense, a top 35 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, and for Denver, they have been a machine at giving up points. Denver is well outside the top 335 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but I do think that North Dakota is going to be able to hold in this game. I'm going to be willing to take a look at the points. North Dakota has been one of the bigger mid-major surprises that we have been seeing that have went really under the radar, because they're out there in the Summit League, but for North Dakota, ever since Tyree Iheanacho, two-time transfer, was able to become eligible for the team, he's given the team a nice spark of life. In 15 games, he's supplying 15 points, 5 boards, 3.5 assists, steal and a half per contest for a team that they don't shoot it well from three. They shoot about 32% from three, 70% at the free throw line, but they only turn the ball over about 10.5 times per contest. You've got BJ Omad, who's able to give you 17 points per game. And with North Dakota, are they doing anything magical on defense? No. In terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, they're still 273rd in the country, but they just are tough as they hit the road, and they actually give up 2.7 points fewer in a road or neutral court environment rather than at home. North Dakota, they are 306th in the country with regards to opponents' three-point shooting percentage. That dives down to about 33.5% when they're away from home, though, and they have the task of going up against Tommy Bruners, giving you 25 points, shooting north of 40% from three-point range, and then on top of that, you've had Jackson Brenchley has been able to give you about 12 points, 5 boards, and then Tuki Tanemo is able to give you about 8 points per boards per contest as well, but I do think that you're going to have Amir Kulojovic be able to keep this North Dakota team lively on the glass. He's been able to give you about 8 rebounds per game. North Dakota, they only turn the ball over about 10.5 times per contest, so they've been able to do a great job on that front end for North Dakota. They've been really just finding different ways to win. In their last 5 games, they have scored 74, 95, 60, 99, and 47 points. So they have really been doing whatever it takes. Last time these two teams played, North Dakota got it done by a count of 92 to 78 in that game. North Dakota, they were able to go 10 to 25 from 3, while Denver was 7 to 18. I do think that things grind down a little bit more. North Dakota has been outside the top 200 in terms of total possessions per game. So I did set my total 155. I'm looking at the under with the way that North Dakota's defense has traveled. I do think the thing in there, willing to take 3.5 for North Dakota along with that under. 801, 802 on the betting board. It is Colorado. They're facing off against UCLA. This is a pick'em game with your total 137. I think Colorado is able to bounce back from what we saw a few nights ago. I did set them as a 4.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take Colorado. I do think that this is a little bit of a rough matchup for UCLA. Now, for Colorado, you always have to have trepidation with this team on the road. They are a bunch in Colorado that has been a top 25 team in terms of their overall three-point shooting percentage, but they shoot well north of 40% from three-point range at home. This does go into the mid-30s when they're away from home, but you still have Tristan Da Silva, KJ Simpson. They've been able to combine for about 35 points per game between the two of them. They're shooting darn near 40% from three, and as a matter of fact, for Colorado, each of your top 5 scorers that'll be able to make at least 1 3, actually make that each of your top 7 scorers that have been able to make at least 1 3 or shooting at least 37.5% from distance. So this UCLA defense, they're going to have their hands full, as they do have Adam Bonas does a solid job down low. He's been able to give you about 6 boards per contest, and for UCLA, this team has not really had too many issues defensively. They are a top 100 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They're approximately 100th in terms terms of opponent's three-point shooting percentage defense, but I do think that Colorado is going to be able to do a halfway decent job of being able to contain a UCLA team that they've had their issues being able to pop it from three-point range. Now, for UCLA, give a little bit of credit where credit is due. This offense was just completely ghastly at the beginning part of the season, and it's still not good to say the least, but they've gotten past the 70-point plateau in 3 of their last 4 games. You've been able to get a lot out of Sebastian Mack with about 13.5 points, stealing half per contest, doesn't necessarily pop threes. That's why you've got Laser Svatovic shooting 35.5% from distance, but Colorado, they do allow opponents to shoot 37% from three-point range away from home, and with UCLA, that's just really not their forte, and Colorado has Eddie Lampkin down low, who's able to give you about 7.5 rebounds per game, and I do think that that's going to be the big key for Colorado, doing a solid job down low, as they are number 10 in all of college basketball with regards to their rebound rate. UCLA, they're about 107th. I think that Colorado finds a way to be able to win from within, be able to pop a few shots from 3, to be able to take control of this one. I set Colorado as a 4.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number in. I did think that this is close enough for late game felling, and we've seen this UCLA offense be a little bit better. I did set my total at a 140.5, looking over and looking at Colorado on this pick 'em line. 803, 804 on the betting board. Washington plays host to Stanford, as Stanford does find themselves as 3.5 to 4 point underdogs. So on this game is 160. I did set Stanford as a underdog of 4.5 points. Here at the 3.5 to 4, I'm going to be willing to lay the number with Washington. Washington has revenge on the mind last time these two teams played. Stanford was able to just completely punk them from three-point range. They were able to win that game by kind of 90 to 80, but for Stanford, they've got some of the most demonstrative home and road splits that you're going to find in all of college basketball through three-point shooting. As for Stanford in that game, they went 13 of 24 from 3, and fully recognize this Washington team well outside the top 125 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but that's absolutely wild. And you got a Stanford team that, in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, are 115th in the country. They score 20.3 points fewer per 100 possessions when they leave home rather than when they are at home. And Stanford, they shoot about 34% from 3 away from home, north of 42% when they are at home. They've got Maximine Radon, a double-double machine who's able to give you 15 points, 10 boards per contest, but they've been dealing with Jared Bynum being in and out of the fold. They've tried to bring him back the last few games, and every single time they've trotted him out there for like 5 minutes. He has not looked like himself, so Stanford without their main facilitator in this game as well. Now, you've been able to have Cannon Carlisle be able to shoot about 38% from 3. He's become a primary scorer with 13 points per contest, and then the two Joneses, and Michael Jones and Spencer Jones, they're both able to shoot north of 40% from distance as well, but that consistency on the road just has not been there for the Stanford team, and Stanford, they themselves have been relatively brutal in terms of their defense. They are well outside the top 150 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Stanford really gives it up from three-point range as well, and then you've got Keon Brooks, who's been able to give you nearly 20 points per contest. He plays well with his former Kentucky teammate, and Xavier Wheeler, who he does have his issues with giving up the turnovers, with Wheeler about 3.5 turnovers per game, but he does give out north of 5 assists per contest. Someone like Paul Mulcahy has not necessarily delivered the way that you were expecting him to be able to do so, but that said, with Washington, they allow opponents to shoot just 29.5% from three-point range at home, compared to 37.5% in a roadside shoot corner environment, and with Stanford allowing opponents to shoot overall about 34.5% from 3, 231st in all of college basketball. I do think that Washington gets their revenge here. I did set my total at 160.5, but the way that Washington has been playing on defense in general, and the way that Washington has been a top 40 team in terms of total possessions per game, I do think that you get an up and down game. So at the 160, I'm going to be taking a look at the over. And with Washington, I'm going to be willing to lay the number. I did set them as a favorite in this spot, more around 4.5, so going to be willing to lay 3.5 to 4. 805, 806 on the betting board. Grand Canyon plays us Utah Tech. Utah Tech is an underdog of 18.5 points, so it'll between 148.5 and 149. I did set Grand Canyon as a favorite of 20.5 points. I'm going to be willing to lay it. Utah Tech just has not been able to take care of the ball. Utah Tech in the bottom 50 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, and I do think that that's really going to be costly. They've been dealing with injuries all season long, as Tanner Christensen has been the main constant for the team, as Christensen is able to give you about 7 boards, 11 points per game, but this team was really going to be based around their three-point shooting, and they just have had a lot of those guys being in and out of the fold, as they've been dealing with an injury all season long to David Elliott, who is shooting about 42% from three-point range. You've had Beion Riley, when he's been out there, be able to shoot about 48% from three-point range, and he should be good to go in this one, but it's been touch and go with him as well. And for the team overall, they shoot 34.5% from 3 with 16 turnovers and a 65% free throw shooting percentage, going up against the Grand Canyon team that has been able to do a tremendous job on the glass. They're a top 75 team with regards to their rebound rate, and Grand Canyon, while they're not shooting the same from three-point range as they did a season ago, last year they were a top 40 team in terms of their three-point shooting percentage percentage are down to about 34% this season. They've been all the better defensively. Grand Canyon, number 8 in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Gabe McLaughlin does not let you get second chances. 7.5 boards, gives you a block per contest, and then tying Graham Foster. He only shoots about 32% from 3, but everything else he is a lead at. 19 points, 5.7 boards, 1.7 steals, 1.5 blocks per contest, and then Rayshon Harrison off the ball hasn't quite shot the same way from 3-point range as he did a season ago, but is efficient. 3.7 assists to fear the 2.4 turnovers per game. You've got a whole bunch of guys that are able to do a nice job hitting the boards, including Duke Brennan, and with this Utah Tech team being a bunch as well outside the top 250 with regards to rebound rate, I do think that this is going to be turning into a butt kicking. These two teams already played. Grand Canyon went on the road. They won that game 75-65 in a game where they shot just 3 of 15 from 3-point range, won that turnover battle 21-10. I think that Utah Tech is going to be taking it even harder, and I do think that the shooting disparity not going to be what it was the first time around for Grand Canyon to be able to cover this game. I did set my line at 20.5. Going to be willing to lay up to 20 with Grand Canyon. Grand Canyon, a relatively mid-tempo team. Utah Tech looking to play a little bit more up-tempo, but I just don't think Utah Tech does their part with this total. Set my total 148.5, so here at the 149, diving under and laying with Grand Canyon. It's 807, 808 on the betting board. Santa Clara is going to be playing in Pacific. And Pacific is a 16.5 to a 17-point underdog. 149 to 150 is your total, and with Pacific, I made them an underdog of 20 points. So here at the 17 to 16.5, I'm going to be willing to lay it. Santa Clara actually owns 3 wins over Pac-12 teams this season, and they were able to get that win earlier in the season against Gonzaga as well. So this team has been rock solid, and we've seen a little bit more fight recently out of Pacific. They had that halftime lead over Gonzaga, but you certainly do have to have your questions when it comes to this bunch for Pacific. They're outside the top 275 in terms of points scored and points allowed on a per possession basis. They've only got one player that's currently averaging north of 10 points per contest in Judson Martindale. They don't have a single guy in the roster that gives you north of 5 rebounds per game in terms of rebound rate. They're well outside the top 275 with that regard. They shoot 63% the free throw line. They're I guess you'd call it below average and not horrible 3-point shooting team at 32.4% with Martindale shooting 41.5% from distance, but that's about all that they've got going for them. Going up against the Santa Clara team, that they've got all sorts of sides. Christoph Chile has been a little bit in and out of the fold the last month or so, but he has a 7-footer. He's able to give you about 4.5 boards, gives you a little bit of stretchability. At about 6'11", Johnny O'Neal lets it fly at about a 32.5% clip from 3, 10.5 points per game. And then Carlos Marshall, Adama Ball, combined 28 points per game with Marshall shooting 43% from 3-point range, and Pacific is certainly going to give it up from distance. 296th in all of college basketball with regards to opponent's 3-point shooting percentage. This balloons up to about 39% when they are away from home. So you've got all sorts of issues there. Recognize that Santa Clara has been going off the rails a little bit in terms of their defense. They're well outside the top 100 with regards to points allowed on a per possession basis. And if you do have a little bit of trepidation with this team, they have been turning the ball over quite a bit as well. 13.4 turnovers per game for the Santa Clara team. But with this Pacific team, man, it's been all sorts of awful for them. Giving up 79 plus points in 4 of their last 5 games. For Santa Clara, at the very least, the defense has been able to maintain 71 points or fewer, given up in 3 of their last 4 games, while the offense, they've still been able to get to at least 70 in 4 of their last 5 games. I think that this should be thorough domination. Set Santa Clara as a 20-point favorite. Going to be willing to lay the number. Santa Clara is a little bit more of an up-tempo team, but with Pacific and their offensive struggles, I don't think they do their part with this total. Semi-total 144, diving under, and going to be willing to lay with Santa Clara. 809, 810 on the betting board. Portland, it's the road face-off against San Diego. San Diego, a 7.5 to an 8.5 point favorite. Totals between 156.5 and 157. I set Portland as an underdog of 5.5 points, so I'm going to be willing to take the points. This Portland team has been a different team when they've been on the road. They are giving up north of 15 points more per 100 possessions away from home rather than when they are at home, but this is also a San Diego team that they are 257th in all of college basketball in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Portland's outside the top 300, so no question about it, that's a bit of an issue, but for the San Diego team, I just don't feel like they're worthy of being able to lay this sort of a number for San Diego. They're only averaging about 0.8 points more per 100 possessions at home rather than in a road/intracourt environment, and you do have a guy down low in Steven Jamerson who's able to give you about 8.3 boards per contest, but past that, you really don't have anyone on the interior. Now, this team does shoot about 35.5% from 3, as you've been able to have Deuce Turner coupled with Wayne McKinney III combining for a little bit over 29 points per contest, combining shoot about 38% from 3-point range, but I do think that Portland has the best player out there on the floor. That would be Tyler Robertson. Gives you 3.5 boards, 3.5 assists, a steal, 16 points per game on 35% 3-point shooting. For Portland, they turned the ball over 12.5 times per contest, so they don't get too out of sorts there. And the rebounding has taken a little bit of an uptick with U2 Yamanachi Williams, who comes in from Lamar. He was out for the first about 16 games this season. He's been able to give you about 5.5 boards per contest. Tyler Harris gives you some good versatility with about 7.5 rebounds per game. Neither of these teams is beastly with regards to being up at the glass by any stretch of the imagination, but San Diego 227th in the country with regards to rebound rate, and while Portland is 311th, it's been going upward a little bit with Yamanachi Williams being out there in the fold. I do think that is going to be enough to be able to keep this team relatively lively in this game. It's a Portland team that they overall do shoot about 34% from three-point range, with them being able to take a little bit of better care of the ball, and both of these teams being just abject disasters with regards to their defense. You've got a San Diego team that they do an okay job of being able to guard the arc, 140th in the country with that regard, but they really give it up along the interior, and for Portland, they really give it up in all sorts. They are 348th in the country with regards to opponent's three-point shooting percentage. I do think that both of these teams are going to be able to get past 75. Question is, are they both going to be able to get to 80? And my answer is no, because I do think that while both of these teams are mediocre on defense, they're both pretty mediocre on offense as well. I said I told 155.5, diving in on the under, won't take anything north of 6 with Portland. 8-11, 8-12 on the betting board. Hawaii hits the road face-off against Cal Poly, and Cal Poly is an 8 to an 8.5 point home underdog. Your total is between 131 and 131.5. Semi-line at 8. At 8.5, I'm going to be willing to take the points with Cal Poly. You may recall the last time Cal Poly played against Hawaii, they went on the road. They were actually able to remain somewhat lively in that game. That's a game that Hawaii won by kind of 83 to 73 on their own floor. Hawaii did shoot just 4 of 21 from three-point range in that game, but they also went 35 of 46 at the free throw line, and I don't think that you're going to see that big of a disparity as Cal Poly in that game took 23 free throws. For Hawaii, they've been able to have Noah Coleman be able to supply about 13.5 points per contest, but Hawaii's outside the top 170 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. The three-point shooting just as up on what it was a season ago. They're shooting about 32.8% from three-point range now. For Cal Poly, it's been all sorts of bad in terms of this roster. For Cal Poly, they rank well outside the top 300 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, or outside the top 275 in terms of their points allowed on a per possession basis, but they might have the best scorer out there on the floor, and that'd be Kobe Sanders. Sanders has been able to supply 18 points, a little bit over 3 assists per contest, shoots about 34% from three-point range, so he's been able to do a quality job there. You've got a Hawaii team that, while they do have a few guys down low that are able to hit the boards, Mo Sek is a 7-footer that's able to give you about a block per contest. Bernardo da Silva, Justin McCoy, they combine for 13 rebounds, and McCoy is able to shoot about 37% from three-point range. It's not a beastly team down low, and that's big because Cal Poly, other than Joel Armitrain, who's able to give you about 4.5 rebounds per game, they've got absolutely nothing on the interior. 347th for the country with regards to rebound rate. Hawaii significantly better at 121st, but not necessarily a dominant team when it comes to just absolutely swatting away shots or anything like that. This is a Cal Poly team as well outside the top 275 in terms of total possessions per game. Hawaii is a relatively low-tempo team as well. I feel like the first time around where Hawaii got north of 80, Cal Poly got north of 70, that was a big giant admiration. You saw that game become a big giant foul fest. We're going to have different refs in this game. I do think that things do bog down as a result. I did set my total at a 128. I think that this is more of the Cal Poly that we all know and love, a team that plays big giant slogs and games that are relative eyesores. As for Cal Poly, they have failed to get past the 68-point plateau in each of their last 4 games. That said, the defense has been able to improve a little bit since the Hawaii game, and for Hawaii, they themselves have been able to really muster up a little bit more defense, giving up 70 points or fewer in 2 of their last 3 games that did not go to overtime. So I'm going to be looking at the under, set my total 128, and here at north of 8, going to be taking the points with Cal Poly. 8-13, 8-14 on the betting board. UC Santa Barbara is on the road facing off against UC San Diego, and UC San Diego is a 6.5 point favorite. Your total is 144 to 143.5. I did say UC San Diego as a 6.5 point favorite. 6 is a max I'm willing to lay, but I'm going to be willing to lay it. And for UC Santa Barbara, this has just turned into a lost season for them. Now, I will say this about UC Santa Barbara. They are one of those teams that have those funky home and road splits, as they're 183rd overall in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They're giving up 10.4 points fewer per 100 possessions on the road rather than at home. They're actually like a top 40 defense when they're on the road. They're a sub 250 defense at home. I have no idea how to explain that, but I mean, my goodness, it has been straight with them. And you got AJ Mitchell, who's a really good primary scorer. He's able to give you 20 points from three-point range. He's been firing in at about a clip of 37.5%, 4 boards, 4 assists, a steal per contest. I like his overall game, but Santa Barbara, they just have been knuckleheads this year. They're turning the ball over 13.3 times per contest. I expected a lot more from a rebounding perspective of Yohan Traore, who's been able to give you only about 5.5 boards, so let's give you 14.5 points per game, but I mean, he's giving you single digits in each of the last 2 games. It's really been Ariel Bland who's been able to dominate things down low, and for UC San Diego, even though this team doesn't necessarily have ideal size, I do like what they've been able to utilize. And Emmanuel Shaminga, the gentleman that comes in from UC Irvine, he's been able to give you about 5 boards, a block per contest. You're looking at a UC Santa Barbara team that is about 55th in the country with regards to rebound rate. With San Diego, they're about 246th, but I do think that they're going to be able to hold in there because you've also been able to have Anabayana Tiat Jones, hopefully I said that correctly, giving you about 5 boards. You shoot 37% from 3 in the overall versatility. I do think he's going to take it out of the Santa Barbara team. You've got Bryce Pope giving you 18.5 points, shooting in the mid-30s from 3-point range, but in the beginning of part of the season, Tyler McGee was out of the fold, came up from the D2 level. He has been able to step in the last 14 games, shoot 44% from 3, 15 points, 2.5 boards. Now, he does shoot 53% in the free throw line, but overall, the San Diego team, they do shoot 76% in the charity stripe, and they don't beat themselves. They only turn the ball over about 9.5 times per contest. If you're looking at turnovers on a per possession basis, this is one of the better teams in all of college basketball. And UC San Diego, I do think that they're going to be able to do a nice job of just being able to stay in front of their man, and they go up against the Santa Barbara team that has been allowing opponents to shoot just 26% from 3-point range away from home. But UC San Diego, they do a good job of being able to generate some second chances with Francis Nworke. I do think that they're going to be able to get the job done in this ordeal. I did set San Diego as a 6.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number, and did set my total at 146.5. For Santa Barbara, they've got some of the weirdest home and road splits I've ever seen with regards to their defense, and I do think that those iron out a little bit. I think that Santa Barbara gets exposed for being, well, a team that was fraudulent coming into the season. So looking at the over, and I'm going to be willing to lay it with UC San Diego. 8-15, 8-16 on the betting board. Portland State plays us in Northern Colorado. Northern Colorado does find themselves as 1.5 to 2 point favorites, and your total is 153 to 154. And for Northern Colorado, I did set them as a 2.5 point road favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay this number as the best player out there on the floor. That is going to be St. Thomas. No, not related to the St. Thomas Tommies, but St. Thomas of Northern Colorado has been leading the team in every single category. He supplies you with 10 boards, 20 points, 3.5 assists, shoots in the low to mid-30s from 3-point range. He's gotten a little bit of help in the backcourt with Jerron Riley, now giving you north of 5 assists per contest. He has really been on a tear recently, not giving you a ton in terms of scoring, but when he does pop it, he shoots about 39% from 3-point range. And Northern Colorado has become a top 55 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. Now, Northern Colorado outside the top 250 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and outside the top 300 with regards to opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. They go up against a Portland State team, though, that it's a whole is greater than the sum of its parts operation. You've only got one guy that gives you north of 9.5 points per game. KJ Allen, 11.5 points, 6.5 boards per contest for a bunch of. They shoot 33% from 3, 69% at the free throw line for Portland State. They just aren't really able to dominate in any facet of basketball. You've had Ishmael Abib be able to give you about 3 assists, be able to give the team a little bit more facilitation and leadership. But Portland State, 291st in all of college basketball with regards to rebound rate. Not that Northern Colorado's batting down the hatches or anything like that, but they're about 171st. You've been able to get a bit of production out of Mr. Bobby Harvey. He's been able to give you about 9 points, shoots 37.5% from 3-point range. But for Northern Colorado, I do think that they're going to be able to dominate in terms of their size. Riley Abercrombie is someone that's 6'9", is able to pop threes at a mid-30s clip. You've had DeJure Dickens be able to chip in there about 15 points per contest as well. Northern Colorado has just been incredibly consistent with their offense. Meanwhile, the defense has been much better. They had a double overtime game against Idaho St in regulation. They had given up fewer than 70 points. So in 4 of their last 5 games, they've given up 71 points or fewer. Meanwhile, this Portland State team, they've just been scuffling on offense. 72 points or fewer scored in 3 of their last 4 games. And I do think that Northern Colorado goes on the road, gets the job done against Portland State, and keeps that offense going. I did set Northern Colorado as a favorite of 2.5 points. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. And in terms of the total, Portland State is playing quite a bit more slowly this season, but I do still think that we get just enough for an over due to late game falling. I said my total 154.5, went over, and I'm going to be willing to lay with Northern Colorado. 8-17, 8-18 on the betting board. Cal State Fullerton is going to be playing against UC Riverside. Riverside is a underdog of 2 to 2.5 points. Total between 130.5 and 131 with Riverside. I did set them as a underdog of 3 points. So you're at the 2 to 2.5. I'm going to be willing to lay with Cal State Fullerton. Fullerton has been a team that I've been dogging quite a bit this year, and rightfully so, other than Dominic Bruton along with Max Jones supplying you to about 27 to 28 points per game. You just really don't have a lot in the backcourt, but for the UC Riverside team, you give them credit for the fact that they don't turn the ball over, only about 10 turnovers per contest. It doesn't lead to very efficient offense, though. UC Riverside shooting 38.7% from the floor, 31% from 3. I do like the fact that you've got Isaiah Moses along with Barrington Hargress being able to combine for about 8.5 assists per game, 24 points between the two of them, but Kyle Owens is the only guy in the roster that gives you north of 3.8 rebounds per game. This is a Fullerton team that's getting by and base it on glass, but they aren't going to have their issues there. You've got DJ Bruton, who's right now leading the way with about 4.5 rebounds per game. But Torrey San Antonio, an all Big West defensive player from a season ago, he missed the first few games of the season. He's getting his act together. He's been able to give you about 8 points per contest. And Fullerton, they're always traditionally a relatively slow and controlled team, going up against a Riverside team that they are well outside the top 250 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. And for Riverside, they just have not been able to get their offense going. They were able to explode for 88 points against UC Irvine, which was one of the more remarkable things that we've seen all season long. But for Riverside, 70 points or fewer even with that performance in 4 of the last 5 games. Meanwhile, for Fullerton, defense has been a little bit better for this squad. They have now given up 71 points or fewer in 5 out of the last 6 games. I do think that Fullerton is going to be able to calm this game down. I do think that with Riverside not being able to control the boards down low, that allows Fullerton to be able to take hold with Max Jones out there in the backcourt. I did set my total at a 131. I think we went a little bit too low with Riverside being a very inconsistent defense, to say the least, here at a 130.5. Looking over, and with Fullerton, wanted to lay up to 2.5 with them, made them a 3-point favorite. 8-19, 8-20 on the betting board. Utah Valley, it's a face-off against Cal Baptist, and Cal Baptist is a 3 to a 3.5 point favorite. Your total between 133.5 and 134 with Cal Baptist. I did make them the favorite of 5 points. I'm going to be willing to lay the number with Cal Baptist. They have been dealing with a few ailments of their own, but I do think that they're going to be able to get the job done, as Dominique Daniels, their top scorer, has been missing the last few games. He's been able to supply the team with about 17 points per contest, but what you are going to have for this Lancers team is down low, darn near everyone all ready to go. As for Cal Baptist, you've had Hunter Goodrick along with Ivan Odriogo be able to combine for about 16 to 17 rebounds per game. This is Cal Baptist team that's in the top 125 nationally with regards to rebound rate, going up against the Utah Valley team that they're outside the top 225 in terms of rebound rate, and it's a Utah Valley team that they're just not going to be able to take advantage of the losses that currently Cal Baptist has. They shoot 27.8% from 3. That's a bottom 30 mark in all of college basketball. They turn the ball over darn near 13 times per contest. Caleb Stone, Carrawell, Drake Allen, they combine for about 23 points per contest, and Allen has been able to give you about 4 assists per game, but these guys just aren't able to find a lot of rhyme or reason, and while Trayvon Doris is able to give you 7 boards and 1.7 blocks per game, he's the only guy for Utah Valley that really gives you north of 4.5 rebounds per game. For Utah Valley, they've scored 72 points or fewer in 4 of their last 5 games. Defense hasn't been bad. They've given up 72 points or fewer in 3 of their last 5, but for Cal Baptist, this team does a really nice job of just sort of sticking you in the mud. They've given up 63 points or fewer in 3 of their last 5 games. I do think that this is going to be a slowed down slog of a game which Cal Baptist is really going to be able to take it out of this Utah Valley team. And for Utah Valley being such a bad 3-point shooting team, going up against Cal Baptist team that you do want to be hurting these guys from the outside because they do such a good job with their big men. You do want to be able to go bombs away as Cal Baptist. They do allow you to shoot about 32.5% from 3-point range. Utah Valley not being able to exploit that, going to be their undoing. I did say Utah Valley as a underdog of 5 points. I'm going to be willing to lay it with Cal Baptist, and did set my total 133, so you're at the 133.5, going under to go along with Cal Baptist. 821, 822 on the big board. Cal State Bakersfield. Meet for the Roadrunners. They play us to CSUN. Cal State Northridge. Northridge is a underdog of a point. Total on this game between 142.5 and 143.5. I did said Northridge is a favorite of 1 point, so I'm going to be looking at Northridge outright on the money line, as currently they are that 1-point underdog. For Northridge, it's been touch and go for this team, to say the least. They do need to hone it in on the 14.5 turnovers per game, but Northridge has continued to do it with rebounding and defense. Northridge, in terms of their rebound rate, they're still a squad that is checking in the top 100 in all of college basketball, going up against the Bakersfield team that is 259th, other than Bodestas Concleras, who's been able to do a very solid job. Concleras, he's been able to do about 6 rebounds per game on the glass. He's been able to do a solid job there. Past that, you really just don't have a lot going on, and for Bakersfield, they play slowly, but they're just not efficient on defense, especially with their 3-point shooting defense at home. At home, they're allowing opponents to shoot 38% from 3-point range. That's outside the top 275 nationally. This is a Northridge team that can be a little bit touch and go in terms of their offense, and ever since G&I Hunt has been becoming eligible, I don't feel like it's really helped out this team very much. As a matter of fact, it might have wrecked what they had really going on. That said, for CSUN, you still have Deshaun Allen Ikens, Deontay Bostic, combining for about 32.5 points per contest. Allen Ikens is able to give you about 5.5 boards, shooting 36.5% from 3-point range for a core that shoot about 31.5% from the outside, but it's not like Bakersfield is shooting some amazing clip from 3, as they shoot 29.4% from 3-point range. As a matter of fact, you've got 2 guys on the roster that average north of 5 points per game. They're shooting above 26% from 3. Caleb Higgins, he gives you 17 points, 3.5 assists. Still, he's really the only guy that averages double figures for the team, but he also shoots less than 30% from 3-point range. Last time these teams hooked up, CSUN got completely punked, and I don't think that they're going to forget it. It was a 64-56 game in which you saw both teams combine to go 3 of 27 from three-point range in that game. CSUN, they just struggled at the free throw line. They had 24 turnovers. I don't think that Cal State Bakersfield is going to be able to duplicate that. This is a well-coached team for CSUN under Mark Newman, and I do think that he's going to make the adjustments to be able to get it done here. I did set CSUN as a 1-point favorite. I'm looking at them outright on the money line, and I did set my total at a 139. This CSUN team is quite up-tempo, but we saw it the first time around. This was a low-scoring slog, and for Bakersfield, this is a team that they really like to slow things down. And I do think that it's going to be a slowed-down slog where Bakersfield is not going to help you out too much with this total. So looking at the under, and I'm going to be looking at Northridge on the money line, 823, 824 on the betting board. Washington State plays host to Cal. California is a 9 to a 9.5 point underdog with your total between 140 and 140.5. I did set Cal as a underdog of 10.5 points. So you're at the 9 to 9.5. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. Washington State has been able to do such a superb job with their defense. A top 55 team nationally in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and they've got a really good home court edge out there at Pullman. It's just a really tough place to gather to, and with this Cal team, you've got two guys in Jalen Tyson, Fardaws Amick. They're able to combine for about 35.2 points per contest. They've been able to combine for about 17.5 boards, 6 assists. They're really nice, but what are you going to be able to get outside them? Jalen Celestine has been inconsistent, only giving you about 8.5 points per contest. Keontae Kennedy, he gives you a few boards, he gives you a few assists, but I mean, he's just someone that he does everything okay. He really doesn't do anything well. And for Cal, they've had their issues on defense, well outside the top 200 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. And this Cal team, 280th in the country in terms of opponent's three-point shooting percentage. Meanwhile, you've got a Washington State team that has been able to do a good job not allowing second chances on defense. They're 79th in the country in terms of opponent's three-point shooting percentage. And then Miles Rice, one of the best scorers in all of college basketball. I know he was overcoming, some personal health issues a season ago. He has now been able to get back out there on the floor, 15.5 points, 4 boards. You don't necessarily have a ton of three-point shooting for this team, but you do have Jalen Wells shooting 44.5% from three-point range, so you should say Wells for a Washington State team is just really smart. They turn the ball over only about 10.5 times per contest. You've got out of your top 5 scorers, 4 of them being able to give you at least 4.7 rebounds per game as well. Even with Joseph Yusufu out of the fold, that has not deterred this team. They've been able to do a nice job just being able to play their slow, grimy, and tough brand of basketball. Washington State, 45th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They score more than 12 points more per 100 possessions when they're at home. I do think the Washington State gets the job done. It takes it to a Cal team that was able to win in overtime last time around. I do think that this could be close enough for late game felling, but I do think that it just drifts out of range, and with this Cal team really giving it up on defense, I do think that this is going to be a nice expose here for Washington State. Set my total at 140.5, so here at 140, looking at the over, and I'm going to be willing to lay up to 10 with Washington State. 825, 826 on the betting board. Pepperdine is the road face off against St. Mary's. St. Mary's a 19.5 to a 20-point favorite with your total between 133 and 133.5, and with St. Mary's, I did set them as a favorite of 19 points. So you're at the 20. I'm going to be willing to take those points with Pepperdine. Pepperdine is certainly going to be up against it in this one. Pepperdine has been looking to slow down their play, but they're outside the top 300 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, going up against the soul-crushing defense of St. Mary's. St. Mary's, a top 5 team in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but you've got guys for Pepperdine, they're able to pop it for 3. Michael J., along with Houston Mallett, have been able to combine to shoot about 42.5% from 3 with 31 points between the two of them. Now you've got Javon Porter back in the fold as well. The brother of Michael Porter, 15 points, 6 boards. He's able to give you some nice versatility. And for Pepperdine, they don't turn the ball over a lot. 10.8 times per contest. It's a St. Mary's team, though, that their defense is not predicated on generating a bunch of turnovers or anything like that. They don't allow you second chances on the glass. They do a nice job of being able to guard the arc, 63rd in the country in terms of opponent's three-point shooting percentage, and they just really get after you in general with regards to not giving you any freedom of movement. Meanwhile, with the St. Mary's team, they should be able to do a good job down low with Mitchell Saxon along to Joshua Jefferson being able to combine for about 13 rebounds per game. Ada Mahaney has become that go-to scorer with 14 points, shoots in the mid-30s from three-point range. So St. Mary's, they're still well outside the top 125 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, but it's really come along for them. 70-plus points in 4 of the last 5 games. The lone exception was that game against Gonzaga. But for Pepperdine, this squad has been able to reach the 70-point plateau in 4 of their last 5 games. They've done it against some relatively solid defenses as well. I do think that they're going to have their work cut out for them in this one, and this is a Pepperdine team that they do play relatively slowly. So I did set my total at 133 at a 133.5. I'm going to be willing to take a look at the under, despite the fact that Pepperdine, well, they certainly are giving it up in terms of their scoring. And if you're looking in terms of their three-point shooting defense. Pepperdine 357th in all of college basketball, but they're allowing opponents to shoot 47.5% from three-point range away from home. I mean, it's a bad three-point shooting defense. There's going to be some positivity there, and I do think that we're going to see a little bit of it here against the St. Mary's team that's still a little bit hot and cold from three-point range. I did set my total at 133. I'm diving in on the under, and I'm going to be willing to take the 20 here with Pepperdine. This is the last game on the normal Las Vegas betting board before we eat the extra games. 827, 828. USC is playing us Utah. Utah is between a 1-point favorite to a pick'em. Totals between 148.5 and 149.5. Good news for USC is that they've got their full allotment of guys back to the fold, and Boogie Ellis, Isaiah Collier, those two guys between the two of them combined to give you north of 30 points per contest, and Ellis shoots above 42% from three-point range, but there's just no fixing this USC defense. Well outside the top 150 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and 337th with regards to opponents' three-point shooting percentage. Now Utah, they give up north of 22 points more per 100 possessions away from home rather than at home, and away from home they allow opponents to shoot 40% from three-point range. So I did set my total at a 150. I'm going to be looking at the over, but I do think that Utah going to be able to get the job done outright on the money line for Utah. Typically, this squad is one that does have those home and road splits. We're seeing that once again, but for USC, this is also a bunch that usually they do a really good job with regards to their interior defense. Meanwhile, the defense from the perimeter, it's a little bit more touch and go, but I mean, this year it's just all bad for them. They don't have a single guy, USC does, that gives you north of 5 rebounds per game. DJ Rodman has kicked it into high gear. He's giving you overall about 5 boards, 7.5 points per game, but recently he's given you double figures in 2 out of the last 3 games. But man, it's been relatively rough for these guys. You've got Brandon Carlson on the flip side for Utah. So they will give you 7 boards, 17 points per game. They've been dealing with the injury to Raleigh Worcester, but Davion Smith has been a really good understudy, and as a matter of fact, he's looked better than Worcester. 6 assists, 10.5 points, shoots 36% from 3, all while turning the ball over just 2.3 times per contest. In the last game, did not score a single point against Arizona State, but still had 9 assists, found a way to be able to impact the game. This guy has had a triple-double already recently, and he came 1 assist shy in that game against Colorado, being able to get a triple-double. He's been able to elevate the team that does shoot about 36.5% from 3. Does take a drop-off when they're away from home, but again, USC, they're just giving it up. Home, road, neutral court, it does not matter. This is a Utah team that they themselves have allowed at least 79 points in 4 of their last 5 games, but for USC, the offense has really hit a snag, as in regulation and regulation only, this team has failed to get past the 70-point plateau in all but 2 out of their last 8 games. I do think that they are going to be able to get some points here on a Utah team that has a different defense when away from home, but they're also a team that's just getting gashed time and time again. So my pick here is going to be on Utah. I did set them as a 4-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number, and when it comes to this total, set it at 150. Also looking it over. Now let's take the extra games.
The normal betting board picks are complete, but there are some extra games today, so we go into the bonus.
306-527, 306-528. Binghamton plays SIU UMBC. UMBC is an underdog of 4.5 points. 157 to 158 is your total. Did set my total at 154.5. I'm going to be looking at the under. Binghamton, a little bit more of an up-tempo team, but Binghamton has not been a team that's been able to put it together on offense all season long in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. Binghamton clocking in about 296th in all of college basketball, though I will say they're scoring about 15 points more per 100 possessions at home rather than in a road or neutral court environment. Meanwhile, for UMBC, they do shoot about 35 to 36% from three-point range as a collective, but for UMBC, they are a bunch of, they're about 193rd in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, and they've just been a little bit inconsistent recently. A lot of it is because they just can't hit the glass. They're having to have Deion Brown do a little bit of everything. He's giving you 15 points, 6 boards, but really not having that true post presence like that last season with Ayubeng Mensah has really been hurting them. Meanwhile, for Binghamton, I do think that this team should be able to dominate from within. You've got one of the most versatile players out there in the AEC, and that would be Mr. Samir Torrance. Comes in from Syracuse, 6 boards, 7.5 assists, 8.5 points per contest. He has been a nice stat sheet sufferer for this team now. Has been dealing with a little bit of injury. You do want to check in on his status. Missed the last game. I do think that he should be back for this one, but that is a little bit of wait and see mode. But Timo Chenery, he has been rock solid for this team, not shooting it well from 3-point ranges. Binghamton overall, they do shoot just 29% from 3, but he's been able to supply the team with about 15 points per contest, and he also does a good job on the glass. If you include Torrance, each of your top 5 scorers for this Binghamton team do give you at least 4.3 rebounds per game, with this UMBC team really just being all over the place in terms of what they're going to be able to get in terms of facilitation. Ace Valentine has been your main facilitator with about 2.7 assists per contest, turning the ball over about 13.5 times per contest. I do think that they're going to play right into the hands of a Binghamton team that has been able to do a rock solid job of being able to lock it down from inside the arc, and on top of that, they're allowing opponents to shoot about 34.3% from 3-point range. Nothing amazing, nothing terrible for UMBC. They've been a solid 3-point shooting defense as well, so I do think that things are going to be a little bit bogged down in comparison to what we usually see out of UMBC games, as UMBC, a top 20 team with regards to total possessions per game, set my total 154.5, diving under, and with Binghamton, even with having the injury concerns of Samir Torrance, willing to lay the number, set them as a 6.5 point favorite. 306, 529, 306, 530. Albany plays with NJIT, and NJIT is an underdog of 8.5 points. 152.5 to 153.5 is your total. I did set my total at 152.5. I'm looking at the over. Albany has been playing at warp speed, top 40 team in all of college basketball in terms of total possessions per game, but they make them a 9.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay with Albany just doing a good job of locking you down from 3-point range, 5th in the country in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. Meanwhile, you've got an NJIT team that, well, they are scuffling in terms of guarding the arc in a road or neutral court environment. They allow opponents to shoot 40.9% from 3-point range, a bottom 50 mark in all of college basketball. You've got Elijah Buchanan, who's been able to give you about 11.5 points per contest, and they've been able to have a few guys be able to step up in terms of the backcourt, but you really don't have anything down low for this NJIT team, which should allow this Albany team to be able to win from within, as well as you've been able to have Jonathan Biko be able to give you about 9.5 boards per contest. Levi The Wall has had to be your top player for NJIT in terms of glass. He's been able to give you about 5.7 rebounds per game, but all in all, it is an NJIT team that is getting gashed on defense or outside the top 225 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, and as a matter of fact, for NJIT, 327th with regards to the rebound rate. They do generate a few turnovers, and this Albany team can get a little bit loose with it, even with Sebastian Thomas giving you 5 assists, 17 points per contest. This team does turn the ball for about 13.5 times per contest, but for NJIT, it's just been rough for the team in general. Credit is due. They've been able to step up a little bit more recently, with the defense giving up 74 or fewer in 4 of the last 5 games, but offense has scored north of 71 points just once in their last 5 games, and with Albany, I do think that their offense is going to be able to bust through in this one. I did set them as a favorite of 9.5 points, so I'm going to be willing to lay the 8.5, and did set my total 153.5, so here at the 152.5. Also going to be taking a look at this total over 306, 531, 306, 532. It is Maine, and they hope to not get Maine. They're on the road facing off against Bryant. Bryant a 5.5 to a 6-point favorite, and your total, it is 141 to 141.5, and with Bryant, I did set them as a favorite of 8 points, so I'm going to be willing to lay this number. Bryant is actually a top 5 team in the country with regards to total possessions per game, going up against a Maine team that's well outside the top 225 with this regard. For Bryant, the question becomes, can they hold on to the ball? Because Maine, they have the top player with regards to steals on a per possession and a per game basis last season, and Kellen Tynes. He's been able to, this year, give you about 2.5 steals, 13 points per game, but for Maine, there's all sorts of inconsistent from the outside. They shoot it at a clip of about 30% from 3-point range, and they go up against a Bryant team that has been doing a really good job in terms of guarding the perimeter. Bryant is a top 80 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and opponents from 3-point range are only firing in there at a clip of about 29.6%, so they have been really dominant with that regard. This is the Maine team that they themselves do a solid job in terms of their defense, especially from the perimeter, but at home, they allow opponents to shoot 24.8% from 3. That goes to about 33.8% in a road or neutral court environment, and Peter Filipowski has been able to give you 14.7 boards per contest for this Maine team, but they are outside the top 250 with regards to rebound rate. That means that the Kryptonite of Bryant, being a team that's outside the top 300 with regards to rebound rate, not going to be unearthed, and you've got Earl Timberlake bringing 60 back for Bryant as well, being able to supply about 13 points, 8 boards. It's a little bit of a top-heavy Bryant team, but also with Timberlake, he's able to give you about 4.5 assists per contest, having Sharif Gross-Bullock be your primary scorer, shoot 39% from 3, 19.5 points per game. Should allow Bryant to be able to get the job done and be able to reverse the script from what we saw the first time these two teams met. That was about 2 weeks ago, and in that game, Maine was able to get the job done by kind of 79 to 72 in a game where you saw Bryant just go 5 of 19 from 3-point range. I do think that they should be able to do a better job here. I do like Bryant to be able to get the job done and be able to get their revenge. I did set this line at 8. I'm going to be willing to lay the number, and did set my total 146. I think that you get similar scoring to what we saw the first time around. So looking over and looking at Bryant, 306, 533, 306, 534. St. Francis of Pennsylvania plays those to Wagner. Wagner is a 3 to a 3.5 point road favorite. Your total is between 125.5 and 126, and with Wagner, I did set them as a favorite of 5 points. I'm going to be willing to lay this number. Wagner playing at their traditional slow control pace, well outside the top 225 in terms of total possessions per game, going up against the St. Francis of Pennsylvania team that is still dealing with an ailment to their top scorer, Cam Gregory. Gregory was able to supply about 11 to 12 points per contest, was really a big form of facilitation for the team, so the backcourt has been looking a lot more to one Carlos Lopez Jr., a freshman who's been able to shoot about 32% from 3-point range, and he's stepped up recently. Take a look at what he's been able to do in the last 3 games, with Gregory being currently out of the fold, and he's been able to supply you with about 45 points. He's been giving you about 2 or 3 assists per game in every one of them, and this team has maintained a little bit better than I thought that they were going to. The defense has been able to be solid, 71 points for fear surrendered in 4 of their last 5 games, but now they go up against a Wagner team that is going to have the best scorer out there on the floor. That'd be Melvin Council. So they will give you about 14.5 points per game. And to the credit of Wagner, they don't do a lot well on offense, but they don't turn the ball over. Less than 10 turnovers per game. They do shoot about 33.7% from three-point range. You've been able to get some relatively good three-point shooting out of Julian Brown as well. He's been able to emerge for this team, shooting about 37.5% from distance, 9.5 points per contest, with double figures in 4 out of the last 5 games. That is transformative for a Wagner team that should be able to do a solid job down low with Eli Wilborn of St. Francis of Pennsylvania being able to give you about 7.5 rebounds per game, but past that, you really don't have much of anything for a St. Francis of Pennsylvania team that's well outside the top 250 with regards to rebound rate. Not like Wagner is absolutely killing it on the glass. They're about 235th, but I do think that with Wagner being able to take much better care of the ball, with St. Francis of Pennsylvania being a little bit short-handed, and this Wagner team just really mauling teams with their defense. 71 points of fear surrendered in all but 2 of their NEC games. I do think that this is going to be a bit of a slog. I do think that's close enough for late game falling, so I do think that perhaps the 125 is one a little bit too far. Semi-total 127, looking at the over, and with Wagner willing to lay up to 4.5 with them. 36-5-35, 36-5-36. Long Island plays us to Fairleigh Dickinson. Fairleigh Dickinson hopes to be fairly priced as 4.5 point favorites. Your total is 153, and Fairleigh Dickinson I did set as a 4-point favorite. Here at the 4.5, I'm going to be willing to take the points with Long Island. Long Island has been able to do one thing very well. They're a top 125 team in the country with regards to opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. Now you take a look at this Long Island team, and no question about it, it has been a just tumultuous season for them in general, but you've got the Stricklands, and I'm talking about all of them. Their father and Rod Strickland, who is the coach, and then Ty and Terrell Strickland. Terrell, a little bit more of a facilitator. He's been able to give out about 7 points, 3 assists, a steal and a half per contest while shooting 36.5% from 3. And Ty is your top scorer with about 15 points per contest, but he has been shooting only about 26% from 3-point range, and you've been dealing with ailment to Terrell Strickland as well. Just returned in the fold against Sacred Heart a few nights ago, so that's going to be a nice addition for the team. RJ Green has been able to give you 7 rebounds per game, and it's a Long Island team that's well outside the top 275 with regards to rebound rate, but so is Fairleigh Dickinson. Fairleigh Dickinson, one of the smallest teams in all of college basketball, though. You do have a trio of guys, Ainsley Almoner, Joel Emmanuel, along with Sean Moore, who have been able to combine for about 17 rebounds per game. You've got Almoner who's able to shoot 40% from 3, but both of these teams well outside the top 250 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Fairleigh Dickinson, though, they're outside the top 250 in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, and for Fairleigh Dickinson, it's an offense that has been held at 62 points for fear in 3 of the last 5 games, while we've seen this LIU team be able to ascend and get to at least 70 points in each of their last 5 games. I do like the current form of Long Island. I do think they're going to get a plentiful amount of points in this one. Did set my total at a 154, so going to be looking at the over, and we'll take anything north of 4 here with Long Island. 306-537, 306-538. Lemoyne plays us to Central Connecticut. Central Connecticut is a 2 to 2.5 point favorite. Your total is between 143.5 and 144. Did set Central Connecticut as 2-point favorite. So here at the 2.5, going to be looking at the points with Lemoyne. Lemoyne has had some pretty demonstrative home and road splits, especially in terms of their offense. Lemoyne does a nice job not turning the ball over. They turn the ball over about 11 times per contest, but for Lemoyne, they've been able to put in there about 16 points more per 100 possessions at home rather than in a road or neutral court environment. And Lemoyne, they're going to need that offense because they are well outside the top 250 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, so they do give up 9.5 points fewer per 100 possessions when they're home. They go up against a Central Connecticut team that's well outside the top 200 with regards to rebound rate. Kellen Amos is the only guy on the roster that gives you north of 5 boards per contest. He throws in their 12 points, and then you've got Alan Jean Rose, Jordan Jones being able to supply the team with about 29 points per contest between the two of them. They do shoot 35.5% from 3-point range, and both of these teams do have their warts in terms of giving it up from the outside. You've got a Lemoyne team that's outside the top 225 in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, and it's a Central Connecticut team that, while they've been able to do a better job with this regard, they still allow opponents to shoot right around about 35.6% from 3-point range overall. That does go down to 34.6% when they're away from home, but not having a lot down low, I do think that that is going to be rough in terms of the Central Connecticut team. And when it comes to Lemoyne, you've been able to have Kayeem Cleary do a solid job, giving you about 15 points, 5 boards per contest. I like Sean Sutherland and what he's been able to bring to the table at 6'6". Would like to see him up his rebounding a little bit, but 14.5 points per game for a offense that is pretty efficient. They shoot as a collective about 36.2% from 3-point range, and each of your top 5 scorers do shoot at least 35% from 3-point range. So at North of 2, I'm going to be willing to take Lemoyne as a home underdog. Lemoyne has been much better with their offense when they've been at home, and did set my total more around a 146. This is a relatively up-tempo Lemoyne team, so looking at the over and looking at the points with Lemoyne. 306-539, 306-540. Vermont plays those to New Hampshire, and New Hampshire does find themselves as an underdog of 8 to 8.5 points. Total is 139. I did set New Hampshire as a underdog of 10.5 points. Here at the 8 to 8.5, I'm going to be willing to lay it. Vermont has actually been one of your top under teams in all of college basketball. They had a little bit of a rough go of it out of conference, but in conference, they have really been putting the clamps down. Going up against a New Hampshire team that is one of the best teams in all of college basketball, being able to guard the arc. They're a top 25 team in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage, but this Vermont team just finds a way to be able to generate offense because they just don't turn the ball over. Only about 9 turnovers per game. They've been dealing with a little bit of an injury to Shamir Bogues, your leader in steals, but he's been able to come back in the fold in recent games, exploded for 23 points, showed that he was really back in that game against UMBC. And for Vermont, even though you don't have a single guy that gives you north of 5 rebounds per game, they should be able to hold their own on the glass against New Hampshire, who does have Clarence Daniels, who's able to give you darn near 20 points, 10 boards per contest. But for Vermont, despite the fact that you don't have that one demonstrative rebounder, this team has still been able to do a solid job, about 178th in the country with regards to their rebound rate, with TJ Lang being able to shoot about 37.5% from three-point range. And then when it comes to this New Hampshire team, they do a solid job of being able to take care of the ball themselves, about 12 turnovers per contest. They shoot about 34% from three, with Jackson Baker being able to supply the team with about 6.5 rebounds per game. And then Ahmad Robinson has been serving as their main facilitator, 5 boards, 5 assists, 15.5 points per contest for a New Hampshire team that they've been able to do an okay job of generating turnovers, but they're not necessarily amazing with it. And this New Hampshire team has been really slowing down in terms of their offense. They have scored in regulation fewer than 70 points in 3 of the last 5 games. Meanwhile, you've got a Vermont team that the defense has just been absolutely swarming here in conference play. They have given up 72 points or fewer in every one of their games. And I did think that Vermont is going to be able to continue that good defense here. I did set them at 7.5 point favorites. So I'm going to be willing to lay the number. And I do feel like we've made perhaps a little bit too much of a move on the total. New Hampshire, a top 40 team with regards to total possessions per game. So I did set my total at a 140.5. I'm going to be looking at the over to go along with Vermont. 306-541, 306-542. Merrimack is on the road facing off against O'Neill. So O'Neill is an underdog of 9.5 to 10 points. Your total is between 129 and 130. And with Merrimack, I did set them as a favorite of 10.5 points. I'm going to be willing to lay it. Merrimack, once again, a top 20 team in all of college basketball in terms of total turnovers forced on a per possession basis, going up against a Sonil team that is outside the top 300 with regards to the rebound rate. They're outside the top 275 in terms of points scored and points allowed on a per possession basis. Do not have a single guy on the roster that's giving you north of 12 points or 4.6 rebounds per game. As Max Zagorowski leads the team in both those categories, shooting about 34% from three-point range. They've been dealing with the injury to Jackson Benchini, who's come back in the fold. He's able to give you 12 points per contest. And you do have Tony Felder, who's able to give you about 3 assists per game, but it's just all sorts of rough for the Sonil team. They shoot less than 40% from the floor, 31% from three-point range, going against a Merrimack team that does a really nice job putting the clamps down. And for Merrimack, they've been able to explode a little bit more with their offense. They've gotten past the 70-point plateau in 3 of their last 4 games. Jordan DeCock has been able to give you 6 boards, 18 points per game. It's a Merrimack team that they still stink from three-point range. They shoot 29.3% from 3, and they themselves, as a lower-tempo team, do turn the ball over about 13.5 times per contest, but you've been able to get really good production with about 12 points, 3.5 assists, and 2.5 steals per contest out of Adam Clark as well. He's someone that's not going to really pop it from three-point range, but Samba Diallo being able to give you a little bit more rough and tumble down low. That means that Merrimack, a team that is still bad with regards to being able to hit the glass, they should still be able to do a solid job against a Sonil team that they just aren't getting anything going, whether that be from the interior or from the outside. I did set my total at a 130.5. It just becomes a question of, does Merrimack get past like the 75-point plateau? And I do think that they have the propensity to be able to do so, despite the fact that I do think that they're going to stonewall Stonehill. I did set my line at 10.5. I wanted to lay the 10 with Merrimack, and looking at this total, overset my total at 130.5. 306-543, 306-544. You've got Radford playing us to Winthrop. Winthrop is a 1-point road favorite. Total is 139.5. I did set my total at a 137.5. I'm looking at the under. Winthrop has been one of your best three-point shooting defenses in all of college basketball, 25th in the country. With this regard, it does go up to about 33.4% from distance in a roadside shoot corner environment, and they do have to go up against a Radford backcourt that's pretty solid. Brian Antoine is able to give you about 11 points. He does shoot from three-point range in that pocket about 41%. Meanwhile, you've been able to have Mr. Justin Archer down low be able to supply the seam with about 8 rebounds per game, which is going to take it out of Winthrop. Winthrop does not have a single guy on the roster who has been able to give you north of 6 rebounds per game, but Winthrop does a really good job by committee of rebounding it. Winthrop has been able to do a nice job of just being able to fold the ball in general with regards to their facilitation, as you've got Kelton Talford along KJ Doucette, or Twin Towers down low. They're giving you about 27 points per contest, and Doucette shoots about 38.5% from three-point range. The 13 turnovers per game, a little bit unsightly for Winthrop. But Kason Harrison gives you 4 assists, 11.5 points per contest. Meanwhile, Meanwhile, you've got Sincere McMahon being able to bomb it at about 40% from three-point range. This team has really good depth. They're able to go right around about 9 to 10 deep. Michael Anumba has been in and out of the fold. That has been hurting the team a little bit, but Alex Timmerman is able to give you about 4.5 rebounds per game. And this has been a Radford team that has really built their, shall we say, identity around defense, and it just has not been the same this season. They're not generating the same amount of turnovers as they have in past years. As a result, in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, the team is 256 in all of college basketball, only giving up 2.5 points fewer per 100 possessions at home rather than in a roadside shoot-scoring environment. You do have DeQuan Smith, Keenan Giles, who have been able to combine for about 29 points, but they only generate about a steal per game apiece. And with Radford just not being able to generate those turnovers on Winthrop, I do think that allows Winthrop to be able to control this game. Winthrop has been able to get to at least 74 points in 4 of the last 5 games. Meanwhile, you've got a Radford team that all of a sudden they've now given up north of 75 plus points in 3 out of their last 5 games. So it's a spot where I did set my total 137.5. I do think that Radford are going to try to get back to basics. This game was supposed to be on Wednesday, by the way. Got pushed back to Thursday. I do think that helps out the defenses on both sides. So looking at the under, I said Winthrop has a 1.5 point favorite. Want to lay the 1 here. 306.545, 306.546. Central Arkansas plays us to Austin Peay. Austin Peay is a 2.5 to a 3 point favorite. Totals between 142 to 143. I said Austin Peay. That's a 5 point favorite. Going to be one to lay the number. Austin Peay outside the top 275 in terms of total possessions per game, but they've done a very nice job of being able to come to the forefront with their overall offense. They've got a pair of guys in Isaac Haney along with Jamonta Black who have been able to do a nice job of being able to pop it from three-point range. Both of these guys combined to shoot about 38% for three, and Black has been able to give you about 12.5 points per contest as a primary scorer. Now, DeMarcus Sharp, he does a little bit of everything for this team. He's supplied the team with 17 points, 7 boards, 4.5 assists, leading the team in darn near every statistical category. He's been out of the fold, though, since January 31st. He has been missing for the team's last 3 games. They've won every one of these games, and they've gone to at least 79 points in every one of these games as well. So they've actually been just fine without him, going up against a Central Arkansas team that they know all about ailments. You've got Cameron Hunter, who has not played all season long. So as a result, they've been looking at Elias Cato along with Tucker Anderson to really headline the team. Anderson is a 6'9" freshman combo player that gives you a steal, 37.5% three-point shooting, and 14 points per contest. They should be able to do an okay job down low with Ogi Bazi Itom, who's been able to give you about 7.5 rebounds per game. But Central Arkansas, well outside the top 300 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, well outside the top 325 in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage. And while this Austin Peay team, they are outside the top 225 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, they do a really nice job being able to guard the arc. They allow opponents to shoot about 32.6% from three-point range. That's 110th in all of college basketball, with Central Arkansas really relying upon three-point shooting, as other than Etam, they really don't have a lot down low. I do think that Austin Peay goes on the road, even with being shorthanded, and gets the job done. Set my line at 5. I'm going to be one to lay the number in for Austin Peay. With having DeMarcus Sharp out of the fold, they've actually been cranking up their offense, so did sell my total 149. Looking at the over, and I want to lay it with Austin Peay, and we wrap things up with 306.547, 306.548. North Alabama plays us at Lipscomb. Lipscomb is a 1 to 2 point favorite. Your total on this game, 157. I set Lipscomb as a 3.5 point favorite, so here at the 1, I'm going to be one to lay the number with Lipscomb. They have absolutely no rebounding whatsoever, but I said this Lipscomb team has been able to find a way with their offense, with Darren Boyd headlining things with 17.5 points. She's 44% from 3, and Lipscomb, they do just absolutely bomb it from 3-point range, and they allow you to bomb it from 3-point range. Lipscomb shoots about 37% from 3-point range, and their 3-point shooting defense allows you to shoot it at 36.5% from 3-point range. They've been better when they've been away from home. They allow opponents in a roadside shoot-score environment to shoot about 34.5% from 3, and they go up against a North Alabama team that, much like Lipscomb, is outside the top 230 in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. North Alabama, they are allowing opponents to shoot about 34.5% from 3-point range at home. That is outside the top 200, but you have for North Alabama quite a few guys that are able to give you some good offense. Bill Sosi has been able to shoot north of 40% from 3-point range. Not necessarily a primary scorer. He only gives you about 7 to 8 points per contest. It's more Jakari Lane along with KJ Johnson, who have been your main guys in terms of being able to put the ball in the basket. 14.5 points per game out of both of those guys. And for North Alabama, they do a nice job of only turning the ball over about 10.9 times per contest. But with North Alabama, you do have one good rebounder in this game. That'd be Damani Forrest. He's been able to do a nice job being able to give you about 8 boards per contest. But past that, you really don't have a lot in terms of being able to defend down low. As a result, North Alabama still outside the top 200 with regards to the rebound rate. Even though you do have Forrest, who's going to be the best rebounder in this game, I do think the Lipscomb, just with the way that they're able to protect the ball, with the way that they have been able to get to at least 76 points in each of their last 4 games, is going to be just enough to be able to get it done on the road. Did set Lipscomb as a 3.5 point favorite, so I'm going to be one to lay the 1, and it did set my total 161. I think that both of these teams are at 80, so looking at the over, and I'm looking at Lipscomb, and that'll wrap things up for the Thursday edition of Cubs Good Seats, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. A big thanks to Sean Paul, does absolutely amazing work over at the Field of 68. He joined me in the last segment. If you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Cubs Good Seats, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, do have one of two ways we offer those in. First one is by Twitter /X timeline at @GNN_D1. Keep in mind, letters EM, they mean does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. Other way, that's fine, an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire on whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review, and I'm coming at you guys every single day throughout the college basketball season. That means I'm coming at you once again tomorrow. Thank you so much for tuning in.
For the ones who get it done, the most important part is the one you need now. And the best partner is the one who can deliver. That's why millions of maintenance and repair pros trust Grainger, because we have professional-grade supplies for every industry, even hard-to-find products. And we have same-day pickup and next-day delivery on most orders. But most importantly, we have an unwavering commitment to help keep you up and running. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.